a knife plunging into the wrong man in a grimy Miami bathroom. Dexter standing over Fribo's body, realizing this isn't Oscar Prado's killer. Miguel Prado, framed in moonlight, staring at Dexter like he's seeing something he can't quite name. Ellen Wolf laid out in a shallow grave, justice turned inside out. And on that rooftop, two men circling each other, the student and the teacher. Hunter and the hunted, both realizing the plan has completely slipped out of control. These are not isolated shocks in Season 3. These are the fracture points in Dexter's illusion of control. The moments where a carefully managed double life starts to collapse because of one man's gaze. Miguel Prado doesn't crack Dexter's secret with a single flash of insight. He assembles it piece by piece from Dexter's own failures, half-truths, and one catastrophic act of trust that turns a grieving prosecutor into the most dangerous witness Dexter will ever create. So let's kick things off with the paradox at the center of this season. Miguel is Dexter's greatest ally and his most lethal enemy, often in the same scene. He is the first person Dexter voluntarily invites behind the mask, and the first person who tries to weaponize that truth for his own agenda. The central question isn't just, how did Miguel find out? It's how did Dexter's attempt to control the narrative hand Miguel the tools to destroy him? To keep this clear, we need to understand who Miguel is when he walks into the story. He's not just another antagonist. He's a high-profile assistant district attorney, a political star in Miami, a man whose entire psychology has been bent around the idea of justice since Oscar's body hit that floor. His job is to read patterns, pressure witnesses, and turn secrets into leverage. In other words, he's professionally trained to do the one thing Dexter cannot afford: investigate inconsistencies. And Dexter gives him inconsistencies. He kills Fribo in a panic, on the wrong body, at the wrong time. Miguel shows up at that house, finds Dexter there, and instantly knows the official story doesn't add up. From that moment, every shared glance at a crime scene, every offhand remark about the system failing, becomes part of an unspoken investigation Miguel is running on Dexter Morgan. In this video, we're going to trace that investigation from both sides. The staged confession about Fribo that is meant to calm Miguel and instead fascinates him. The code Dexter tries to teach, which Miguel immediately bends around Ellen Wolf, exposing that he doesn't want rules, he wants permission. Each major section will follow the trajectory from allyship to open threat, from rooftop admiration to rooftop confrontation. Along the way, the focus is not just on what Miguel discovers, but on what Dexter reveals. Every attempt to manage Miguel, every lie told in the name of control, pushes them both toward that rooftop edge, where only one of them walks away. So when that rooftop edge finally comes into view, we need to understand the man standing opposite Dexter. Miguel Prado doesn't arrive as some random guest star in Season 3's investigation. He walks in like Miami royalty. A powerful assistant district attorney with a political last name, a practiced smile, and a courtroom presence that bends juries by sheer gravity. We see him work a room the way Dexter works a crime scene, shaking hands with judges, trading favors with cops, consoling victims' families as cameras linger just long enough to capture the angle. Miguel is plugged into every artery of the city's legal and social networks: charity galas, backroom deals, press conferences where he sells the system as righteous and responsive. On paper, he is the personification of law and order. In practice, he's already halfway to believing the rules are his to interpret. But the public image only makes sense once we hit the emotional core: Oscar Prado's death, a brother bleeding out in a scuzzy house, a drug dealer named Fribo, a case that should have been routine and controlled. Instead, it becomes the trauma that radicalizes Miguel's already obsessive sense of justice. From that moment, every file he opens is Oscar's file. Every defendant is a potential Fribo. Every acquittal feels like a personal failure. This is where Miguel's psychology tilts. Before Oscar, he's ambitious. After Oscar, he's crusading. He doesn't just want convictions, he wants correction, punishment, moral balance. The central question for him is no longer what can I prove in court, but what will make this feel fair. That shift is subtle in the beginning, but it's exactly what positions him to notice when Dexter's explanations don't add up. He's already reading beyond the surface of every story. To keep this clear, Miguel lives in a dual register. Public hero, private rage. We watch him explode at colleagues, intimidate witnesses, and push ethical lines so hard they blur. His temper is legendary. His pride almost ritual. He can be inspiring when he's tearing into a corrupt defendant, and quietly terrifying when he stares down someone who challenges his authority. How do you cross-examine a man who believes he is the law? Along the way, that duality makes him uniquely dangerous to Dexter. Most cops trust procedure. Miguel trusts himself. Most colleagues assume the system's limits are real. Miguel assumes limits are for other people, so when he senses something off in Dexter's calm, in Dexter's convenient proximity to violence, he doesn't back away. He leans in. In this video, we're going to track how that leaning in becomes an obsession. Because Miguel isn't just another obstacle on Dexter's trajectory, he's the first person whose worldview is already warped enough to accept and eventually embrace a killer who claims to serve a higher code. That belief is what will turn a courtroom crusader into an apprentice, then a rival, and finally, a target. And that brings us to the moment the whole Miguel storyline pivots from theory to blood on concrete Oscar Prado's death. We meet Oscar not as a faceless statistic, but as Miguel's kid brother who already walked through the fire. Former gang member, former enforcer, a man clawing his way towards something cleaner. He's taking classes, working, trying to live under the shadow of the Prado name without becoming its muscle. The focus is not just on who he used to be, but on how fragile that new trajectory really is. Enter Fribo, low-level dealer, connected to Oscar through that old street life. When we reconstruct the night in question, it's almost mundane at first. Oscar goes to confront Fribo about a girl, about drugs, about a world he promised he'd left behind. Dexter is hunting Fribo too, already running his own plan based on Harry's code, already convinced this is just another target to neutralize and disappear. Then, everything collapses at once. The house is cramped, chaotic, there's shouting, movement, the kind of close-quarters confusion where one bad decision becomes permanent. Oscar charges in, gun out, trying to play savior and big brother in the same breath. Fribo panics. Dexter watches from the margins, trying to maintain control of a situation that has already slipped past his grasp. A struggle, a misstep, a single shot. Oscar goes down. To keep this clear, Dexter doesn't pull the trigger, but he is there when the body hits the floor. He sees the blood, hears the last breath, and in that instant, he makes a choice that will define the rest of the season. He lets Fribo escape, then later kills him, according to the code, quietly rewriting the narrative of what really happened in that room. The official story is simple and brutal. Oscar Prado, ex-gang member, tragically killed in a drug den while confronting a dealer. The investigation frames it as the past catching up with him, another cautionary tale from Miami's underbelly. On paper, it's neat. In Miguel's psychology, it's anything but. Miguel is left with a toxic cocktail, grief for the brother he couldn't save, guilt for never fully believing Oscar had changed, and an obsessive need to assign blame that the file can't satisfy. How could a man fighting so hard to go straight end up dead in exactly the place he was trying to escape? Who really failed him? And this is where Dexter steps into Miguel's emotional blast radius. Dexter processes the scene, stands over Oscar's body, offers the polished, clinical language of a blood spatter analyst. But Miguel notices things: Dexter's proximity to the case, his oddly composed demeanor, the way he's always near the center of the investigation without ever being the story. Along the way, those details start to itch at Miguel's instincts. Oscar's death doesn't just wound Miguel, it gives him a mission. Find the man truly responsible. Punish whoever let this happen. That mission makes him hyper-attuned to anyone orbiting the case with too much calm, including one very quiet expert who already knows far more than he should. From that night on, Miguel isn't just grieving. He's hunting, even if he doesn't yet know that the real quarry is standing right beside him in the morgue. Miguel starts hunting in that morgue, and Dexter walks straight into his sights with the Fribo plan. On paper, this is classic Dexter. Controlled, compartmentalized, invisible. In practice, it's the first time in this story that his plan doesn't just wobble, it collapses in real time. To keep this clear, we need to see what Dexter thought would happen. Stalk the target, confirm the victims, prepare the kill room, leave no evidence. Fribo is supposed to be a textbook application of the code, a violent drug dealer, already in the system, already blamed for multiple murders. Dexter's psychology frames this as low risk. He knows the neighborhood, he knows the schedule, and he knows he can get in and out of that decrepit house without a single footprint on the official investigation. So, he lays it out. Plastic ready. Tools organized. A narrative in mind where Fribo simply vanishes into Miami's background noise, while the police, Miguel, and the Prado family keep chasing a ghost. The focus is not just on the kill itself, but on the story after the kill. Dexter's name stays off every report. His presence never even crosses Miguel's radar. Then, reality walks in with a knife. Literally, Fribo panics, the fight turns messy, and the clean choreography of the ritual disintegrates into a cramped, chaotic struggle. No kill room, no careful prep, just blood, adrenaline, and improvisation. And in the middle of that chaos, Oscar Prado bursts into the scene, driven by the same mission we just watched ignite in the morgue. What are the odds that the one person Miguel loves most walks into Dexter's unplanned kill? Oscar dies on Dexter's blade, not as a target, but as collateral. That's the real failure. Not that Fribo survives the night, but that Dexter now has a body he never planned for, and a witness he can't fully account for, Miguel himself, arriving minutes later, emotionally primed and already tracking every inconsistency. From there, the forensic and procedural loose ends start to fray the illusion of control. Dexter is on scene before he should be. His explanation for being near Fribo's place doesn't quite match his usual invisible routine. The timing of Oscar's death, the absence of clear Fribo evidence, the way Dexter hovers just a little too close to the case, each detail is small, but together they tilt the investigation's trajectory. In this video, we're going to keep returning to this pattern. Dexter doesn't just fail when he leaves physical evidence. He fails when he loses control of the narrative. Here, he kills the right man according to the code, but he can't contain the consequences. Miguel is the one person emotionally invested enough to feel that gap. The central question forming in his mind isn't who killed Oscar, it's who was really there with him. Along the way, that question will mutate from suspicion to fascination to something far more dangerous, setting up the moment Dexter tries to seize back control by telling Miguel a carefully edited version of the truth. So when Dexter hands Miguel that gap in the story, Miguel doesn't just feel it, he starts living in it. Grief doesn't fog his vision, it weaponizes it. From the moment Oscar's body hits that plastic in the alley, Miguel is doing two things at once, mourning his brother and building a case in his head. We see it in the way he refuses closure. Where most families would cling to the official report, Miguel keeps reopening it, like a wound he won't let scar. He revisits the alley. He walks the path Oscar supposedly took. He stands where the blood dried and runs the timing over and over. When Oscar left, when Fribo was allegedly there, when Dexter arrived. The plan the department offers him is simple. Oscar confronted Fribo. It went bad. End of story. Miguel's psychology rejects that neatness on impact. In this video, we're going to treat Miguel's grief as its own investigation, because that's what it becomes. He hounds the detectives for details that don't matter to anyone else, who called it in, who processed the scene, exactly when Dexter showed up. He reads the reports the way he reads case files, looking for contradictions in statements, subtle shifts in language, any sign that someone is nudging the narrative in a particular direction. To keep this clear, the inconsistencies that bother Miguel are small on paper and enormous in his gut. The timing doesn't quite line up. The story of Oscar charging in on Fribo feels off, especially given what Miguel knows about his brother's temperament. Dexter's presence is a problem too. Why is the quiet blood guy first on scene for Miguel's personal tragedy? And why does Fribo, a sloppy, panicked dealer, suddenly become the perfect scapegoat for every unsolved mess in Miami? From a prosecutor's eye, that's not closure. That's overreach. Miguel has built his career dismantling stories that look this convenient. A single name catching every blame, a single suspect tying off multiple loose ends, a single explanation that lets everyone keep their sense of control. The focus is not just on who could have killed Oscar, but on who benefits from the case being sealed so quickly. Contrast that with Lagarta and the rest of the department. For them, Oscar's death is a tragedy they can at least file. Fribo did it. Dexter helped. Case closed. They need that emotional off-ramp in a season already flooded with bodies. Miguel can't take it. Where they see a merciful end to the paperwork, he sees a story that violates his understanding of how chaos actually behaves. And slowly, the trajectory of his doubt bends toward Dexter. He doesn't have language for it yet. He can't say serial killer or code or dark passenger. But his pattern recognition keeps circling the same point. Dexter is always there, always prepared, always one step ahead of consequences, in a way that doesn't match his mild exterior. Each major section of Miguel's day, from courtroom to crime scene to late-night brooding in his office, now includes a quiet side task, rerunning Dexter's role. Along the way, that prosecutorial instinct will stop just analyzing Dexter's alibis and start testing Dexter himself, pushing us toward the moment suspicion turns into a dangerous kind of trust. And this is where the investigation stops being abstract and starts sitting across from Dexter at lunch. Miguel doesn't just circle Dexter on paper, he reaches for him in person. Oscar dies in that filthy house, Fribo escapes Dexter's plan, and in the chaos, Miguel locks eyes with this quiet bloodspatter guy who just happened to be there when his brother bled out. From that moment, Miguel latches on. We watch him project meaning onto Dexter's silence, reading the lack of visible grief as a deeper, more controlled version of his own. Miguel sees a man who isn't falling apart and assumes discipline, empathy, shared pain held in check. He never considers that Dexter's calm is concealment, not composure. The psychology flips. Instead of suspecting Dexter, he recruits him emotionally, treating him as the one person who gets what justice really costs. To keep this clear, Dexter's perspective is almost the mirror image. He doesn't see a soulmate, he sees a shield. A powerful prosecutor obsessed with the same criminals Dexter targets? That looks like perfect cover. If Miguel is focused on external enemies, he's less likely to question the helpful forensic analyst by his side. Dexter folds Miguel into his plan to blend, to look more human, to stabilize the fade of control Harry's code promised him. But emotional proximity is its own kind of evidence trail. Late at night, in dim offices and empty parking lots, they trade stories about cases that collapsed, monsters who walked on technicalities, and the failures of a system Miguel has spent his life trying to weaponize. Miguel rages. Dexter offers curated sympathy, and every time Miguel says, "You really understand me," Dexter nods, thinking he's just maintaining the mask. Is he? Or is he rehearsing a confession without using the word? Along the way, the bonding gets tactile. Hands on shoulders at crime scenes, drinks after court, Miguel showing up uninvited, insisting on talking through the latest outrage. Each visit is framed as mutual support, but functionally, it's Miguel gathering data. Dexter's tells when murder is mentioned, his too precise insights into killers' routines, the way his eyes track blood and not tears. The focus is not just on friendship, it's on pattern recognition disguised as camaraderie. This is a double-edged alliance. Each major section of their growing friendship, from Oscar's funeral to strategy sessions about Fribo, gives Dexter more social armor and Miguel more access to the man underneath. Every time Dexter lets Miguel in to protect his cover. He also hands him another piece of the puzzle, a slip in language, a reaction that doesn't match the room, a moral line that seems disturbingly flexible for a family man. In this video, we're going to follow how that intimacy curdles. Because once Miguel has enough of those pieces, he stops seeing Dexter as a comforting mirror and starts seeing him as something far more useful, a weapon he might be able to aim. From here, the relationship shifts into a quieter, more dangerous phase. Miguel stops just being grateful and starts paying attention, not to what Dexter says, but to how he moves through violence like it's weather. We see it first around Oscar's death and the Fribo investigation. Miguel is shattered, raging, desperate for control, while Dexter walks that crime scene with the same measured detachment we've watched for 3 seasons. No trembling hands, no raised voice, just clinical interest in blood, angles, and opportunity. To everyone else, that reads as good CSI. To a seasoned prosecutor who has stood beside a lot of real grief, it pings as off. Who looks that calm when the alleged killer of their new friend's brother is on the loose? Then there are the gaps. Miguel asks where Dexter was when certain leads went cold, when Fribo suddenly vanished, when the plan to box in the suspect somehow evaporated overnight. Dexter gives those vague, frictionless answers he's rehearsed his whole life. Working late. Family stuff. You know how it is. But Miguel doesn't know how it is. And, more importantly, he doesn't believe people without alibis. Each dodge gets mentally tagged, not as proof, but as a pattern. To keep this clear, the red flags are small. Dexter's oddly specific interest in certain offenders. His habit of nudging Miguel toward particular theories that just happen to protect Dexter's own trail. His ability to predict how a violent man will escalate, almost as if he's walked that trajectory himself. None of this screams serial killer yet. It just screams, as Miguel would put it, interesting. And this is where Miguel's psychology fractures. On one side, there's the friend he wants, the man who was there when Oscar died, the stable family presence, the ally who shares his disgust at the system's failures. On the other, there's the professional instinct, that has kept him alive in a courtroom where everyone lies. That instinct keeps whispering that Dexter's calm is not normal, that his timing is too perfect, that his moral language is just a little too flexible. So Miguel starts testing, not with subpoenas, but with conversations. Over late-night drinks, in parking lots, on the edges of active investigations, he throws out hypotheticals about justice and punishment. What do you do when the code fails? When the law lets a monster walk? When the plan collapses and there's no appeal left? Dexter answers with that cool, abstract philosophy Harry planted in him, and Miguel hears something electric under the words. No hesitation, no fear of consequences, just a quiet acceptance that sometimes people need to disappear. Along the way, the central question for Miguel shifts. It's no longer, can I trust this man? It becomes, what is this man capable of? He doesn't land on serial killer. Not yet. But he knows Dexter is hiding something large, something actionable, and that suspicion becomes the lens through which he watches everything next. Every lie, every coincidence, every body that turns up near Dexter's orbit will hit harder, because the groundwork for doubt is already in place. And once that lens is fixed, the next mistake Dexter makes won't feel random to Miguel. It will feel inevitable. And once that lens is fixed, the next mistake Dexter makes won't feel random to Miguel. It will feel inevitable. All Miguel needs is one moment where the mask slips, one moment where the quiet blood guy stops being safe. That moment comes when the law fails him in broad daylight. Picture the courthouse after a hearing where a violent offender walks on a technicality. Miguel is already seething. This is his crusade, his plan for justice collapsing under procedure. Dexter is supposed to be the calm one, the controlled one, the man who processes evidence instead of emotion. But in the hallway, when Miguel rants about the system, Dexter doesn't just nod. He snaps. We see it in his eyes first, the way his jaw locks, the way his voice drops from mild to lethal as he says, essentially, that some people don't deserve the protections they exploit. It's not a joke. It's not venting. For a second, the code and the cover story fall away, and we glimpse the raw psychology underneath, pure, targeted hatred. This is the same energy we've seen in kill rooms. Now it's bleeding into public space. To keep this clear, nothing explicitly incriminating comes out of Dexter's mouth. He doesn't confess. He doesn't outline a murder. But he talks about real consequences and making sure he never hurts anyone again, with a conviction that doesn't match a lab tech's job description. The mask of neutrality cracks, and Miguel is close enough to feel the heat. The central question is, how does Miguel read that heat? Most people would back away. Most people would clock something off and file Dexter under potential problem. Miguel leans in. His reaction is not fear, it's recognition. He hears his own rage echoed back at him, stripped of legal language, and it electrifies him. Instead of seeing pathology, he sees purity, righteous anger, finally unfiltered. This is where Miguel's internal investigation changes shape. Up to now, he's been trying to figure out what Dexter is hiding. After this, he starts to imagine what Dexter could do. The focus is not just on Dexter as a liar, but as latent force. If this man ever stopped playing by the rules, what would that look like? Could that be useful? Along the way, Miguel's obsession with results over rules finds its perfect vessel. The system lets a predator walk. Dexter's eyes promise that someone else won't. That hallway flare-up recalibrates Miguel's mental model in an instant. Dexter is no longer just the socially awkward lab guy who happens to be near a lot of bodies. He is a potential instrument, a weapon that simply hasn't been fully drawn yet. Each major section will later show Miguel pushing harder, testing Dexter's boundaries with names like Ellen Wolf, treating the code as negotiable. But it starts here, with that first glimpse of unmasked rage. So when Dexter eventually confesses, Miguel isn't horrified. He's relieved. The thing he thought he saw in that hallway, it's real. And now, in his mind, he can finally aim it. So when Miguel finally sees that rage and decides he can aim it, the story needs a trigger. Not another abstract debate about justice. A face, a case, a failure. That's where the system hands both men the same enemy and dares them to respond. Enter a particularly toxic kind of predator, a repeat offender who walks on what looks, to Miguel, like a paperwork trick. A witness recants after being intimidated. A key piece of evidence is ruled inadmissible because of a bad search. The judge lectures the state on constitutional rights, while a smirking defendant straightens his tie and walks out of court. We've seen versions of this all season, but here the pattern hardens into a single, infuriating symbol of collapse. In this video, we're going to keep returning to these pressure points, where Dexter's private code and the public system collide. To keep this clear, think about Miguel at counsel table, watching the verdict. Not guilty. He knows the history. He knows the bodies that never made it into evidence. And yet he has to stand there, bound by rules of procedure, while a man he's sure is a monster thanks the jury for their service. Miguel's anger is not subtle. He rants about judges who care more about optics than victims, about defense attorneys gaming technicalities, about politics strangling what should be a straightforward investigation. He talks about Oscar, about all the cases that slipped, about how the law rewards manipulation and punishes certainty. Every line is a confession of his own cracked faith. The plan he built his identity on, that the law, if wielded hard enough, will deliver justice, has failed in public, with cameras rolling. Dexter is in the back of the courtroom, watching, cataloging. This isn't just another angry prosecutor. This is a man whose psychology is sliding into his orbit. Miguel's fury is focused on the same target Dexter has already marked, but for different reasons. For Miguel, it's betrayal of the system. For Dexter, it's confirmation, the file, the pattern, the victims all fit the code. The difference is, only one of them has a way to fix it. And this is where Dexter's internal calculus kicks in. He sees the opening. If Miguel keeps staring at him as a suspect in Oscar's death, Dexter's entire life is an investigation waiting to happen. But if he can redirect that suspicion, reframe himself not as the problem, but as the solution, then Miguel's rage becomes a tool. A story. A controlled narrative about what really happens when the system fails. The focus is not just on whether this criminal dies, but on what that death will mean to Miguel. Will it read as coincidence, as fate, or as proof that someone out there can do what he only dreams of? Late that night, after another strategy meeting that's really just venting, Miguel reaches his breaking point. The room is quiet. The case is effectively dead. And he turns to Dexter with the question that changes their trajectory. What would you do, he asks, slowly, if you could really stop someone like this? Dexter doesn't answer, not yet. But in that silence, the next plan is already forming. Dexter's answer doesn't come as a clean confession. It comes as a calculation. In that pause, after Miguel's question, we watch Dexter do what he always does. Run the plan, weigh the risk, and convince himself he can stay in control by revealing just enough. In this video, we're going to treat that moment as a psychological crime scene. Because before Dexter ever puts Miguel on a kill table, he performs a different kind of experiment on him, a curated unveiling of the dark passenger. Dexter's mindset is simple and arrogant. If he gives Miguel a half-truth, he thinks he can relieve suspicion, manufacture loyalty, and still keep the real secret. Years of bodies, trophies, and a life built on Harry's code, safely buried. So when he finally confesses, Dexter doesn't say, "I'm a serial killer." He reframes himself as an extreme problem solver. We see it in the way he talks about Fribo and then about men like Fribo. He explains that sometimes the system fails, investigations stall, and monsters walk. In those rare, exceptional cases, he takes care of it. No rituals, no plastic, no blood slides, just a reluctant guardian stepping in where the law can't reach. To keep this clear, Dexter is not sharing his identity, he's pitching a role. Vigilante, not butcher. The psychology underneath is crucial. Dexter believes narrative is another tool, like a syringe or a bone saw. If Miguel accepts this carefully framed story, then Miguel becomes a shield, a powerful prosecutor who will stop asking questions, stop digging into Fribo, and start defending Dexter's version of reality. The central question for Dexter is not, can I trust Miguel? It's, can I program Miguel? But the second the words leave his mouth, the plan starts to fail. Watch Miguel's reaction in real time. First, there's genuine shock, that wide-eyed freeze where his moral training collides with what he's just heard. Then, almost immediately, we see the rationalization kick in. He paces. He talks about how the law has limits. He reframes Dexter's killings as a necessary extension of justice. And then comes the pivot that dooms them both. This could be useful. In that instant, Dexter thinks he's succeeded. He sees acceptance and mistakes it for containment. He believes he's just bought himself loyalty, when in reality, he has handed a morally unstable, power-hungry prosecutor the keys to his entire worldview. The focus is not just on what Miguel knows now, but on what he can imagine. If Dexter can do this once, why not again? If the code can bend for Fribo, why not for Ellen Wolf? This is where Dexter's plan completely fell apart on a psychological level. He thought he was managing Miguel's perception. Instead, he licensed Miguel's fantasies. Along the way, that half-truth becomes more dangerous than a full confession, because it gives Miguel just enough of the darkness to feel righteous while he rewrites the rules for himself. And once Miguel starts testing those rules, Dexter's illusion of control over this partnership doesn't just crack, it collapses. Miguel doesn't walk away from Dexter's half-confession. He leans in. The man who should be the loudest voice for law and order in Miami quietly decides that the system's failure is his opportunity. We watch the shock on Miguel's face mutate in real time into something colder and more calculated. He stops asking, "How could you?" and starts asking, "Who else deserves this?" That pivot from horror to targeting is the real birth of the partnership. In that moment, the investigation Miguel cares about most is no longer Bay Harbor or Fribo. It's Dexter's psychology. What are the rules? How far can this go? And crucially, how can he use it? To keep this clear, Dexter thinks he's containing the damage. He presents the code as a rigid moral firewall. Only killers, only certainty, only what Harry would approve. Miguel immediately reframes it as a noble crusade. He tells Dexter that what he does is necessary, that the courts are weak, that someone has to take out the trash. He flatters Dexter's need for control, his fantasy that he's principled rather than simply homicidal. If Harry's code was already a fragile design, Miguel upgrades it into a heroic myth. From there, the plan accelerates. They start sharing information. Miguel brings case files and off-the-record intel, quietly steering Dexter toward targets that fit his own grudges. Dexter walks Miguel through the selection process, the background checks, the confirmation of guilt. Stalk the target, confirm the victims, prepare the kill room, leave no evidence. Each step that Dexter narrates as discipline, Miguel hears as permission. The cabin kill with Ethan is the turning point. Miguel watches Dexter wrap plastic, lay tools out with surgical precision, and deliver the ritual speech before the knife. For us, it's a behind-the-scenes tour of Dexter's supposed mastery. For Miguel, it's a live demonstration of a power he's already imagining using on his own. Dexter believes he's teaching the code. Miguel is studying the man, how he moves, what he hesitates over, which lines he refuses to cross. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to this asymmetry, because it's where Dexter's illusion of control over Miguel truly collapses. Dexter thinks the rules are the anchor of their alliance. You follow my code, we maintain order. But Miguel is mapping the weak points, the places where the code bends under emotional pressure. A brother's death, a corrupt defense attorney, a personal slight. Along the way, every lesson Dexter offers becomes a stress test. Miguel files away the rituals he can fake, the safeguards he can skip, the justifications he can twist. By the time Miguel nominates Ellen Wolf as a target, the central question isn't whether he understands Dexter's nature. It's whether he's already decided to surpass it, and what happens when Dexter realizes the student has weaponized the teacher's secret against him. By the time Miguel finally steps into a kill room with Dexter, the theory of the secret is over. This is contact. This is proximity to the thing he's been circling since Oscar's death. Plastic first. It's everywhere. Walls, floor, even the ceiling of that isolated cabin space sealed into a gleaming, suffocating cube. We hear it crinkle under Miguel's shoes as he walks in, the sound too loud, too clean, like he's already contaminating a church. The tools are laid out in a careful line: knives, tape, saw, the familiar syringe. Nothing chaotic, nothing improvised. It looks less like a crime scene and more like a surgeon's tray, waiting for the operation to begin. Dexter moves through it with that unnerving, unhurried control. No wasted motion, no visible emotion. He tapes down Ethan's limbs with the same calm he uses to bag evidence at a crime scene. He speaks in short, efficient sentences. He presents the photos of Ethan's victims almost like exhibits in court. From Miguel's point of view, this isn't just violence. It's a ritual with a closing argument built in. At first, Miguel recoils. The smell of plastic and sweat, the muffled panic of a man who knows he won't leave the room, the gleam of the knife catching the fluorescent light. His body understands the horror before his mind can rationalize it. This is murder. This is the line he's sworn his whole career to prosecute. But then, the psychology shifts. Dexter lays out the case, the victims Ethan tortured, the investigation that stalled, the system that failed. Each major section will feel, to Miguel, like another exhibit in a trial the law refused to hold. Revulsion gives way to fascination. The plan is airtight. The evidence is undeniable. The consequences are immediate. Where his courtroom victories are always fragile, subject to appeals and technicalities, this verdict is permanent. We watch Miguel's posture change. He leans closer. He asks questions. How did Dexter find Ethan? How does he make sure they're guilty? To keep this clear, the focus is not just on what Dexter is doing to Ethan, but on what he's doing to Miguel. He's offering him a working model of power beyond the code, even as he thinks he's teaching restraint. When Dexter finally drives the knife in, Miguel doesn't look away. He exhales. It's relief, and it's recognition. The forbidden thing he suspected is now undeniable, tactile, and effective. In this video, we're going to keep returning to this pattern. Once someone sees Dexter's process up close, the illusion of control collapses, and the temptation to copy it explodes. By letting Miguel into the kill room, Dexter hands him a blueprint. The plastic, the tools, the ritualistic precision, the way the investigation is repurposed into a justification, Miguel absorbs all of it. And crucially, he imagines it without the brakes. What if this method wasn't chained to Dexter's code? What if justice could mean anyone Miguel decided was an obstacle? Along the way, this is the moment that quietly shifts their trajectory from partnership to inevitable war. Miguel doesn't test Dexter's code with some anonymous predator in a back alley. He reaches for someone who already lives in his bloodstream, Ellen Wolf. That choice is not random. It's diagnostic. Let's kick things off with who she is in Miguel's psychology. Ellen is a high-powered defense attorney, a constant thorn in his side in court, and, in his mind, the personification of everything that lets monsters walk free. We watch him seethe as she dismantles his cases, as she protects men he believes should be rotting on death row. To Miguel, she isn't just a rival, she's an accomplice to evil, wearing a tailored suit. But when he starts bringing her up to Dexter, it's not casual conversation. It's an experiment. Over beers, in quiet hallway corners, in those low, intense exchanges, Miguel frames Ellen as morally equivalent to the killers Dexter already targets. She lets them go. She knows what they've done. The language blurs the line. If Dexter kills murderers because they hurt people, and Ellen helps those same people escape, what's the real difference? Miguel is watching, almost clinically, for how Dexter answers that question. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to that gap between what characters think the code means and what it can actually justify in practice. Here, the central question for Miguel becomes simple. Is Dexter a principled force he has to work around, or a weapon he can point at anyone? To keep this clear, Miguel keeps circling Ellen, testing the boundary again and again. Dexter's response is the first time we see him try to articulate a hard limit to someone outside his family. He pushes back. Repeatedly, he tells Miguel the plan is not about who annoys them or beats them in court. The code is about clear-cut killers, about evidence, about certainty. Ellen may be infuriating, she may defend the guilty, but she doesn't meet the standard. Personal grudges don't get a plastic-covered room, and that resistance is baffling to Miguel. From his perspective, Dexter is already doing what the legal system can't or won't. Why stop here? Why draw the line at a woman whose victims are theoretical? Miguel's frustration leaks through the charm. If Dexter really is his dark avenger, why is this one woman off limits? What is this invisible rulebook Miguel can't see, but keeps slamming into? Along the way, Miguel starts to reinterpret Dexter's rigidity not as strength, but as vulnerability. A real, rigid code means predictable behavior. Predictable behavior can be mapped, pressured, and eventually subverted. Ellen becomes the perfect stress test. If Dexter won't bend for her, then Miguel knows exactly where the code ends and where his own power can begin. That realization quietly shifts his trajectory from student to saboteur, and it sets up the next lethal step. What happens when Miguel decides to enforce his version of justice without Dexter's permission? Miguel doesn't just drift past Dexter's boundary with Ellen Wolf. He detonates it. The moment Dexter refuses to bend the code for her, Miguel quietly decides the code is the problem, not Ellen. From there, the plan becomes his. No plastic, no ritual, no careful investigation of past victims. Miguel uses what he's seen in that cabin with Ethan, what he's inferred from Dexter's psychology, and he reverse engineers a kill that feels Dexter-like without any of the restraints. He stalks Ellen, isolates her, and has her abducted and murdered, then dumped in a way that mimics the Bay Harbor butcher's precision without actually following the rules that gave that precision meaning. It's an imitation kill, a counterfeit code. To keep this clear, Miguel isn't following Harry's system. He's weaponizing Dexter's secret as a toolkit for personal vengeance. Ellen isn't a monster who slipped through the cracks. She's a professional rival who challenged him in court. That distinction is everything. It's where we see Miguel stop being the grieving prosecutor seeking justice and become a man who's realized that killing, done the Dexter way, can erase anyone who threatens his sense of control. Then, Dexter walks into the crime scene. Bright daylight, police tape, the hum of a familiar investigation. On the slab, Ellen's body is laid out with an eerie clinical neatness. No obvious struggle. Efficient wounds, a dump site chosen for privacy and easy cleanup. It looks like his work. But it isn't. This is where the central question flips, from can Dexter train Miguel to what has Dexter unleashed. Dexter reads the scene like a mirror with one crack running through it. The angles are wrong. The timing is off. The choice of victim violates every safeguard Harry drilled into him. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to these moments, where Dexter's own methods become evidence that someone else can imitate, distort, and finally expose. Inside Dexter, something fundamental shifts. Until Ellen, he could pretend Miguel was a volatile ally who just needed firmer boundaries, a student who might test the code but ultimately respect it. Ellen's body tells him the truth. Miguel has taken the secret without the leash. The code that was supposed to contain Dexter's darkness has become a template for someone else's unfiltered rage. That's not mentorship. That's replication without ethics. And strategically, this is the point where Dexter's plan completely fell apart. The partnership he thought would shield his double life has created a rogue variable walking around with the ability to point the entire system at Dexter. If Miguel is caught, the pattern leads back to the teacher. If Miguel talks, the story of Bay Harbor stops being myth and starts becoming testimony. Along the way, we've been tracking how every attempted structure of control collapses on Dexter. Miguel is different because the failure isn't just operational or relational, it's existential. Dexter has to accept that as long as Miguel lives, his own secret is no longer his to manage. Which raises the next brutal step. What do you do when the only way to protect your code is to break it on the man you taught? Dexter answers that question the only way he knows how. He runs the investigation on himself. He doesn't start with Miguel. He starts with Fribo, with that first, sloppy deviation from the plan. A kill done for Deb, done in anger, done without the usual ritual of stalking, confirming, preparing, from a blood-soaked bathroom floor to Miguel walking in at exactly the wrong moment. We watch Dexter replay the chain of events and realize the central question isn't how did Miguel find out anymore, it's how much of me does he already have in his hands. To keep this clear, Dexter walks back through each step. The improvised story at Fribo's place, the calculated confession about taking justice into his own hands, the cabin demonstration where Miguel watches him wrap plastic, wield a knife, and turn murder into procedure. Each attempt to contain Miguel's curiosity becomes, in hindsight, a training montage. Dexter thought he was managing a volatile ally. In reality, he was onboarding his most dangerous future target. And then there's Ellen Wolf, a defense attorney, not a predator. A woman Miguel marks for death because she embarrasses him in court and blocks his cases. When her body turns up, the scene is wrong. No careful layout, no forensics proof ritual. Just rage, improvisation, and a prosecutor who now believes the code is whatever he needs it to be. This is where Dexter's psychology shifts. The focus is not just on Miguel breaking a rule, it's on Miguel using Dexter's language of justice to justify something Dexter would never have allowed. Suddenly, the risk matrix explodes. Miguel knows too much about Dexter's methods. He has seen the plastic, the tools, the calm. He respects the code too little to keep those methods hidden. Every freelance kill Miguel commits, every body he leaves with even a hint of Dexter's influence, becomes a breadcrumb that could lead any serious investigation straight back to Miami Metro's favorite blood spatter analyst. What happens when the Bay Harbor butcher pattern starts re-emerging? But this time, Dexter isn't the only one laying out the design. So Dexter revises the plan. He stops thinking in terms of mentorship and course correction. His new objective is colder and far more complex: dismantle Miguel completely. Reputationally, so no one believes his word. Physically, so he can never speak it. And all of that has to happen without triggering the nuclear option, the one scenario where Miguel, cornered, names Dexter Morgan as the monster behind the mask. In this video, we're going to see Dexter do something he's never done before: build a kill not around a stranger's file, but around a friend's knowledge. Miguel believes he's unlocked Dexter, but he holds the upper hand because he can expose the secret. Dexter, quietly, begins designing a new kill room in his mind. This one has to be perfect, because the next plastic he lays down is for the only man who truly knows what he is. And if that plan fails, the collapse won't just take Miguel, it will take everything. So when does that theoretical kill room in Dexter's mind become a real, shared space of danger? It happens on a night that, on the surface, looks like a victory. Miguel and Dexter finally aligned, blood on their hands, justice done outside the courthouse lights. To keep this clear, we're talking about the aftermath of their first true collaboration, when Miguel either watches Dexter take a life or stands close enough to feel the violence radiating off him. Dexter, who has built an entire identity around isolation and invisibility, deliberately cracks the door. He walks Miguel through the plan, the timing, the way he knew the target would be alone. He lets Miguel see the plastic, the precision, the calm. It feels controlled. It feels safe. It is neither. This is Dexter's first major structural error with Miguel. He believes that by offering a curated slice of his darkness, he can redirect Miguel's rage into something manageable, show him just enough of the code to keep him from going completely off the rails. In Dexter's mind, this is containment, a pressure valve. If Miguel sees that there is a system, a standard, then maybe he won't spiral into random revenge. But watch Miguel in that scene. He doesn't flinch, he doesn't gag or back away the way a normal person might. He leans in, eyes bright, breathing steady. He asks how Dexter knew this man would be here, at this hour, with no witnesses. He wants to know how Dexter picked him, why this specific monster deserved to die. Why? Disturbingly. It feels so right. Each question is framed as gratitude, but underneath it, there's something else: investigation. In this video, we're going to keep returning to that psychology, because this night plants three crucial seeds in Miguel's mind. First, Dexter clearly has access to information and instincts other people don't. No ordinary blood spatter analyst just happens to be in the right abandoned location with the right tools. Second, Dexter is visibly comfortable with lethal solutions. There is no hesitation, no moral wobble, just execution. Third, there is obviously a system Dexter isn't fully explaining, a hidden architecture behind the kill that Miguel is now desperate to map. The focus is not just on the blood spilled, but on the paradox Dexter creates. He thinks he's offering a controlled peek behind the curtain to secure loyalty. In reality, he's handing an obsessive prosecutor a pattern to study, a methodology to reverse engineer. What happens when the man who lives for evidence realizes his best friend's life is one long crime scene. Emotionally, the bond between them deepens. Miguel frames Dexter as an avenging angel, the answer to every case that slipped through his fingers. That flattery feeds Dexter's dark passenger and lowers his defenses even further. Along the way, every shared secret feels like safety to Dexter and like data to Miguel. From this night on, Miguel isn't just grieving, he's studying. Every laugh, every late-night disappearance, every coincidental arrest now sits inside a new possibility. What if this man has been doing this for a very long time? And what else is he hiding? So when Dexter finally decides to tell Miguel the truth, it doesn't happen in daylight or in a conference room. It happens where his worst plans always unfold, late at night, emotions high. Control slipping. We're in that dim, intimate space after Oscar's death, after the Fribo investigation has twisted both men into knots. Miguel is raw, needy, circling Dexter, with questions that sound like grief, but land like cross-examination. And Dexter makes a decision that feels bold, even honest, in the moment. He's going to come clean, just not all the way. To keep this clear, Dexter's intent here is tactical, not moral. He isn't confessing to unburden his soul. He's running narrative damage control. Miguel has already clocked the coincidences around Fribo, the gaps in the official story, the way Dexter always seems to be near violence without ever being touched by it. So Dexter reframes himself as a man who understands violent justice. A vigilante in embryo, not a fully formed serial killer with a code and a career. The mechanics of the half-truth are precise. Dexter admits he killed Fribo, or at least that he took justice into his own hands when the system failed. He leans into the emotional beats Miguel wants: Oscar's memory, the rage at a broken investigation, the fantasy of finally doing what the law cannot. But he leaves out everything that would reveal the real architecture of his life. No plastic wrap, no blood slides, no years of prior kills stretching back through season after season of carefully curated coincidences. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to that gap between what Dexter says and what he structures his entire existence around. From Dexter's perspective, this is supposed to work like a psychological pressure valve. Give Miguel one finite, shocking revelation. Satisfy the central question that's eating at him: how far would you really go? Then convert that curiosity into loyalty, complicity, and ideally, silence. But Miguel Prado is a prosecutor. Half-truths are his native language. The moment Dexter admits to one illegal killing, Miguel's brain doesn't stop at relief. It accelerates into investigation. If you cross the line once, why not twice? If you could improvise a murder for Oscar, what about all those other cases where justice miraculously aligned with your instincts? Watch Miguel's reaction. Outwardly, he's grateful, moved by the apparent trust, almost reverent toward Dexter's sacrifice. Internally, though, we can feel the gears turning. He isn't horrified. He's intrigued. He immediately starts probing the edges, testing what Dexter will admit, what he'll deny, and where this strange new partnership might lead. The focus is not just on the confession itself, but on what it formalizes. This doesn't close Miguel's private investigation. It legitimizes it. Dexter has confirmed there is a secret, and in doing so, he's given Miguel emotional permission to dig deeper, to imagine a wider trajectory of hidden violence. And that's the real failure. If this is what Dexter is willing to say out loud, what horrors must still be buried in the dark? Miguel walks away with more questions than answers, and those questions are exactly what will turn his curiosity into a weapon. Miguel walks away with more questions than answers, and Dexter thinks that's a win. In reality, he has just invited an obsessive prosecutor to start treating his life like an open case file. This is where the relationship mutates. On paper, this is Dexter's dream scenario, a powerful figure inside the justice system, not only accepting his urges, but endorsing his code. In practice, it becomes the most traceable, evidence-heavy phase of his existence. Let's kick things off with those early planning sessions. We see them in conference rooms, parking lots, and that infamous cabin. Miguel arrives with files, names, and righteous fury, waving case folders on men like Ethan and other predators who slipped through technicalities. Dexter counters with calm analysis, forensic insight, and a chilling ease with killing as the logical endpoint of the investigation. Miguel brings emotion. Dexter brings procedure. Together, they start building a plan that looks disturbingly like a joint venture. From a legal pad covered in names to crime scene photos spread across a table, Miguel watches Dexter work. He notices the encyclopedic recall of blood spatter patterns, the way Dexter can predict where a suspect will move, when they'll be alone, how the city itself can be used as a trap. And then there are the conditions. Dexter will not move until certain boxes are checked: physical evidence, corroborating testimony, a pattern of violence. He vetoes targets Miguel is sure deserve it, insisting they do not meet the standard. To keep this clear, Miguel is not just impressed, he's compiling. He starts to see that Dexter is not improvising revenge. There are rules. There's language that sounds rehearsed, almost doctrinal. Dexter talks about people deserving it, about only killing those who will kill again, with the cadence of someone reciting scripture rather than brainstorming. The central question quietly shifts for Miguel from "will this guy help me get justice?" to "how many times has he done this before?" As the season progresses, the alliance escalates. What begins as one cathartic act for Oscar's death metastasizes into a list, a project, a mission. Miguel starts pitching future kills the way a trial lawyer pitches cases, testing Dexter's boundaries. What about this gang member? What about this defense attorney shielding monsters? Each suggestion is a probe. How far will Dexter go, and what kinds of power will he refuse to wield? Dexter thinks he's in control. He believes he's training Miguel to respect the code, shaping a volatile man into a disciplined vigilante. But every time he explains why a target is off limits, why a kill room must be prepared a certain way, why timing and alibis matter, he is handing Miguel a syllabus of his own behavior. Selection criteria: operational discipline, psychological tells. Miguel is effectively processing a live crime scene, and Dexter is walking him through the evidence. In this video, we're going to keep tracking this partnership as a slow-motion car crash we cannot look away from. Along the way, Miguel's first serious test of the code will not only expose Dexter's methods, it will shatter Dexter's illusion of control and turn this shared mission into a countdown to betrayal. Miguel's first real test doesn't happen in a kill room. It happens in a conference room. Fluorescent lights, case files spread across the table, Miguel pacing while Dexter watches from the edge of the frame. On paper, they're reviewing an investigation. In reality, Miguel is probing the limits of a system he barely understands yet: Harry's code. To keep this clear, Miguel's motivation at this point is a volatile mix. He's grieving Oscar. His ego has been supercharged by the feeling of personally delivering justice through Dexter. And underneath that, there's a new addiction forming: the thrill of lethal power, with no courtroom, no appeals, no oversight. The central question for Miguel becomes simple: is Dexter's code a fixed law, or just branding for a killer who will do what Miguel wants if he pushes hard enough? So Miguel selects a target who lives in that gray fog between legal innocence and moral guilt. In the show, that role crystallizes around Ellen Wolf, a defense attorney who keeps getting violent offenders back on the street. She's not a serial killer. She's not stabbing people in alleys. She's a cog in a system Miguel hates, an obstacle to his political trajectory, and a convenient avatar for all the cases he's lost. She is, in other words, exactly the kind of person Harry's rules are designed to exclude. Miguel doesn't present her that way, of course. He wraps her in outrage. He talks about victims' families, about monsters walking free because of technicalities, about how someone like Ellen is worse than the killers she defends. He leans on Dexter's shoulder figuratively and literally, lowering his voice, loading every detail with personal stakes. If Dexter is secretly looking for permission, why not see if he'll bend when the emotional pressure spikes? And Dexter does feel that pull. Miguel's validation is intoxicating. For once, someone is not only accepting the dark passenger, but celebrating it. There's a seductive plan on the table. Stop thinking. Stop investigating. Just become Miguel's blunt instrument. No more lonely code. No more pretending to be normal. Just sanctioned violence. But this is also where Dexter's illusion of control digs in its heels. Harry's code is the one narrative that keeps him from admitting he's pure chaos. So when Miguel pushes Ellen Wolf as a target, Dexter doesn't just say no. He starts reciting the operating system. Proof, pattern, direct responsibility for death, certainty beyond reasonable doubt. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to this moment because Dexter is literally handing Miguel a checklist. Miguel nods. He agrees. He plays the respectful student. Inside, he's doing something else entirely. He's cataloging every criterion Dexter names, testing each one against his own psychology, already thinking about how to manufacture proof or bypass it altogether. And this is the critical data point. Miguel learns Dexter isn't random. He's systematic. That means past accidents, unpunished killers who vanished off the grid, can be retroactively mapped to this code. Each major section will show how that realization turns Miguel from partner to predator, but it starts here, with a refused kill. From this point on, Miguel isn't trying to just participate in Dexter's world. He's planning how to outmaneuver the code itself. And once he does that, outmaneuvering Dexter becomes the next logical step. Because what happens when a man like Miguel stops asking Dexter for justice and starts using Dexter as cover for his own collapse? And that brings us to the name that turns a philosophical disagreement into a body on the floor. Ellen Wolf. On paper, she is everything Miguel hates. A high-profile defense attorney, constantly on the news, carving up his cases with technicalities and procedural gotchas. In the courtroom, we watch her dismantle his big speeches, reframe his righteous fury as overreach. And walkmen, Miguel is convinced are predators right out the front door. She's morally complicated, absolutely, but she's not a hand-son killer. That distinction is everything for Dexter. And it's exactly what makes Ellen the perfect stress test. From Miguel's perspective, Ellen is not just an adversary. She's the system made flesh. Every acquittal, every plea deal, every loophole he's ever watched a guilty man slide through gets projected onto her face. To keep this clear, she represents three things at once for him: professional humiliation, moral outrage, and the tantalizing idea that, with Dexter in his corner, he never has to lose to her again. Why argue emotion when you can erase the lawyer? In this video, we're going to keep coming back to this pattern. Dexter thinks he's designing a controlled outlet, and someone else sees open season. Ellen is where that gap between intention and outcome becomes impossible to ignore. Miguel starts small. Offhand comments about how she defends monsters, a bitter joke about wishing she'd just disappear. But the more victories she takes from him, the more his language shifts. He stops talking about her clients and starts talking about her. not they deserve consequences, but she deserves what they get. Each conversation with Dexter is a little more intense, a little more explicit, almost daring Dexter to agree that the world would be better off without her. Dexter's reaction is our tell. He's suddenly evasive, changing the subject, hiding behind the letter of the code like it's a badge. Ellen may be infuriating, he admits, but she isn't the one spilling blood. For Dexter, that line is non-negotiable. Killers only, no matter how much they aggravate you. That's not morality in any traditional sense. It's control. It's a rule that lets him believe his violence is contained. Miguel hears something very different. Every refusal becomes, in his psychology, a loyalty test. Are you with me or not? Are we actually fixing this broken system, or are we just play-acting justice while lawyers like Ellen keep winning? This is where the power dynamic flips. Up to now, Miguel has treated Dexter's code as a shared mission, the thing that makes them partners. With Ellen, he starts to see it as a leash, a limitation, a failure of nerve that keeps them from fully using the power they've discovered together. And once he sees Dexter that way, the trajectory shifts. Dexter is no longer an equal, he's a tool that refuses to be fully used. So Miguel begins imagining something else. What if he applies Dexter's methods without Dexter's permission? What if Ellen Wolf becomes his own private experiment? Along the way, the show does something quietly brilliant. It sets Ellen up not just as a victim, but as a forensic mirror. However she dies, however the investigation unfolds, Miguel will be watching closely, measuring reality against Dexter's rituals, testing how well he's learned the craft. The central question becomes not will Ellen survive, but how far will Miguel go when Dexter says no? Ellen's fate is going to answer that, and in the process, it will expose just how carefully Miguel has been studying every plastic sheet, every knife stroke, every vanished body in Dexter's orbit. Ellen Wolf's body drops into the narrative like a trapdoor. One moment, she's a loud, inconvenient conscience in Miguel's world. The next, she's gone, and Dexter feels the disturbance before the investigation even catches up. The timing, the secrecy, the way the murder radiates moral theater instead of random violence. It feels like one of his, except Dexter didn't do it. That gap between what Dexter planned and what actually happened is where Miguel steps out of the role of student. To keep this clear, Miguel doesn't just wake up one day and snap. He applies everything he's been watching, the stalking, the pattern recognition, the calm rehearsal of how to make a person vanish without leaving a trail that a prosecutor or a blood spatter analyst can easily read. He studies Ellen's routines, waits for isolation, chooses a moment when no witnesses will complicate the story. It's Dexter's operational logic, repurposed. Miguel has seen the cabin. He's seen the plastic, the knives, the way Dexter's voice goes flat when the kill is in motion. So when he goes after Ellen, he's not improvising. He's following a template. Separate the victim from their environment. Control the timing. Strip the act of hesitation. Even if he doesn't recreate the full ritual, no blood slides, no meticulous tableau, he gets the skeleton of the system right. The structure holds, even if the details wobble. From Dexter's perspective, the horror arrives in stages. First, the professional curiosity, a prominent attorney, targeted in a way that doesn't fit the usual patterns. Then the uncanny recognition, the absence of evidence where there should be some, the surgical neatness in how the scene frustrates the investigation. And finally, the personal realization that Miguel has killed like him. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to this pattern, Dexter's plan for control, breeding the exact failure it was designed to prevent. Because Miguel isn't just any amateur, He's a career prosecutor. He knows how detectives think, how crime scene techs build a narrative, how juries respond to certain types of violence. That legal psychology becomes his version of a code. When he stages Ellen's death, he doesn't only copy Dexter's method of killing, he mirrors Dexter's method of disappearing. No obvious motive he can't spin, no clean line from himself to the body, just enough ambiguity to send the investigation sideways. And this is where the central question for Miguel flips. If he can reverse engineer Dexter's style from a handful of shared kills and one cabin demonstration, what does that say about Dexter's history? This can't be a one-off. It has to be a career of refinement, a long trajectory of bodies that never made it to court. The power dynamic tilts. Miguel no longer needs Dexter to act. He needs him as a reference point, a living manual he can consult or, if necessary, threaten. Ellen's death is the moment the apprentice becomes a rival, armed with just enough of Dexter's secret to be dangerous, and just unpredictable enough that Dexter's next plan to rein him in will only expose more of the truth he's been hiding. So Dexter does what he always does when a plan collapses. He tries to reassert control with a lecture. After Ellen Wolf's body turns up, he's furious and terrified, but he can't admit that to Miguel without exposing the real stakes, so he wraps his panic in moral language. He isn't saying, "You've put my life at risk." He's saying, "You've betrayed the mission." In this video, we're going to see how that distinction is everything. Dexter corners Miguel and frames the conversation as disappointment. Ellen wasn't a murderer. The evidence was thin. The timing was impulsive. From a distance, it sounds like a prosecutor scolding another prosecutor. Underneath, it's Dexter revealing exactly how his own operation works. You don't kill without proof. You don't kill out of anger. You don't kill where the investigation can circle back to you. Keep this clear. Dexter is forced to spell out the code's logic in a way he rarely does on screen. He walks Miguel through the triage, confirm the target's guilt, isolate them, minimize collateral damage. He emphasizes patterns, risk, long-term consequences. And in trying to separate his proper kills from Miguel's reckless one, he's basically narrating his own career. Every restriction he names is a breadcrumb, pointing backward to dozens of unseen bodies that must have followed these same rules. The irony is brutal. What Dexter thinks is damage control is actually disclosure. Each major section will sound, to Miguel, less like a reprimand and more like a manual. We can almost watch Miguel's psychology shift in real time. He keeps his posture small, his voice low, his words contrite. But his eyes stay locked on Dexter, tracking which parts of the code make him flinch, which hypothetical violations spike his fear. When Dexter snaps about choosing the wrong victim, Miguel learns the code is obsessed with guilt. When Dexter fixates on timing and visibility, Miguel learns exposure is the real nightmare. The central question in Miguel's mind stops being, "Was I wrong to kill Ellen?" and becomes, "How many times has he done this right?" A rigid system doesn't appear overnight. It's built through repetition, through trial, through failure. Along the way, Miguel realizes the code is less a moral shield and more a cover story for a long, secret trajectory of killing. The stricter the rules Dexter recites, the more obvious it is that they've been field tested. This isn't theory. This is case law. Dexter's tactical mistake is thinking he can still sculpt Miguel into a safe ally instead of cutting him off. He believes that if he just teaches harder, if he clarifies the rules, he can pull Miguel back under control. But he's training someone who already sees him as a resource to be exploited, not a mentor to be obeyed. That lesson plays like an inadvertent confession. By the end of the confrontation, the power dynamic has inverted again. Dexter walks away convinced he's reestablished boundaries. Miguel walks away with a sharper profile of Dexter's secret life and a new metric of leverage. If this man has that much to lose, why submit to his code at all when you can operate above it? The next step is obvious. Quietly start checking whether Miami's unsolved monsters line up with Dexter's rules, and see just how big this secret really is. So now, we cut to Miguel, alone in his office, hours after everyone else has gone home. Fluorescents buzzing, tie loosened, desk buried in manila folders. This isn't the grieving brother or the swaggering politician anymore. This is a prosecutor quietly flipping the room, turning an emotional obsession into an investigation with Dexter Morgan at the center. To keep this clear, Miguel doesn't start by hunting a serial killer. He starts by doing what he's always done, reading cases. He pulls files where suspects vanished mid-investigation, where bodies were never recovered, where promising leads just stop. No witness recantation, no alternate suspect, just a procedural stall that looks, to us, exactly like a clean kill executed outside the system. These are the negative spaces Dexter's plan always relies on. No body, no trial, no narrative for the court to follow. In this video, we're going to lean into Miguel's shift from gut feeling to pattern recognition, because that's where the real collapse of Dexter's illusion of control begins. Miguel starts overlaying what he knows of Dexter's code onto these gaps. He filters for defendants who walked on technicalities, notorious abusers, and repeat predators who slipped through on bad warrants or tainted evidence. Then he checks dates and times against Dexter's workload. The nights Dexter was called to scenes, the weeks he was buried in a particular file. One case jumps out: a brutal enforcer, rumored to have half a dozen bodies, disappears the same week Dexter processed blood from one of his assaults. No body, no crime scene, just an investigation that goes from frantic to silent overnight. Another, a string of gang murders, where the presumed shot caller is suddenly no longer a person of interest, right after Dexter spends 3 nights in a row at related crime scenes. What are the odds? Miguel notices the pattern of professional cleanup, the way some scenes feel almost too tidy, as if someone with forensic expertise anticipated every test he himself would order. The central question for Miguel stops being, did Dexter kill Fribo? And becomes, how long has Dexter been doing this? And here's the crucial psychological turn. Each match doesn't horrify him. It thrills him. With every aligned date, every vanished monster, Miguel's admiration grows. He starts to see Dexter not as a one-time avenger he can use, but as an ongoing solution the city never knew it had. A pattern killer with a code that conveniently targets exactly the people Miguel has spent his career failing to put away. Along the way, leverage crystallizes. If this pattern is even half true, Dexter has decades of consequences hanging over his head. Prison is the polite version, the real outcome is total life collapse. Miguel understands that the more of this history he can infer, the more Dexter has to lose if anyone ever formalizes these dots into an official case file. Dexter, meanwhile, still thinks Miguel only knows about a handful of events, a single season of his trajectory, rather than the series. That's the asymmetry. Miguel is quietly building a mental dossier titled Dexter Morgan, and he no longer needs a single smoking gun. For him, the pattern is the proof, and that certainty will drive his next move, stop just mapping Dexter's code, and start testing how far Dexter will go to protect it when this decades-long pattern is threatened. Miguel's next move doesn't look like an investigation. It looks like friendship. A backyard barbecue, cigars on the patio, a quiet drink after a long day in court. On the surface, it's 2 colleagues unwinding. Underneath, it's the first live test of the profile he's built in his head. Dexter Morgan, the man who does what the system can't. He starts with philosophy, not accusation. Miguel leans back, smoke curling in the air, and talks about men who do what needs to be done when the courts fail. He muses about long-term solutions to crime, the kind that don't show up in any file. The focus is not just on policy, it's on a specific kind of operator. Someone who plans, someone who controls outcomes when everyone else accepts failure. To keep this clear, Miguel's strategy is elegant. He never says serial killer. He never says you. Instead, he sketches hypotheticals that perfectly mirror Dexter's reality. What if there were guys who'd been cleaning up this city for years without a badge? What if some monsters just disappear when the law looks the other way? He watches Dexter the way Dexter usually watches everyone else, tracking tension in the jaw, averted eyes, the beat too long before an answer. We can feel the pressure invert. Usually Dexter is the one running the silent experiment. Here, he's the lab rat. Every casual remark feels like a probe. If Dexter deflects too quickly, that's suspicious. If he agrees too eagerly, that's worse. So he splits the difference, offering cautious, abstract support for strong action while avoiding specifics. And in doing that, he confirms Miguel's core suspicion. There is something here to protect. Along the way, Miguel keeps tightening the emotional frame. He talks about Oscar, about the guilt of letting predators walk, about the shared burden of seeing what others refuse to see. Then he shifts into loyalty language. Their bond is unbreakable. They'll carry things together. They're in this for the long haul, whether they like it or not. Is he talking about grief or about bodies that never make it to trial? This is the loyalty trap. By speaking around the secret, Miguel signals that he understands enough of Dexter's code to be dangerous, without ever putting a clear accusation on the table. That asymmetry forces Dexter to treat him as if he already knows everything. If Miguel is bluffing, oversharing will expose Dexter. If Miguel is not bluffing, undersharing could turn him into an enemy. Either way, Dexter's margin of control collapses. From Miguel's perspective, it's a psychological victory. He gets to watch Dexter flinch at lines about people disappearing, see the tiny pauses when he praises anonymous vigilantes, and log those reactions as confirmation. All while maintaining perfect, plausible deniability. In this video, we're going to keep returning to this pattern. The moment Dexter stops naming his own reality is the moment his enemies start writing it for him. By the end of these conversations, Dexter understands the new terrain. He's no longer hiding a private hobby. He's entangled in a relationship where unspoken knowledge can be weaponized at any time. And the more he tries to pull back, the more Miguel will escalate from hints and hypotheticals to overt power plays, forcing Dexter to consider a plan he never wanted to make. How do you kill the one person who almost understands you too well? So once Dexter understands that Miguel isn't a student of the code, but a rival ideology in a suit, the entire trajectory shifts. Miguel has killed Ellen Wolf outside any pretense of rules, outside any shared plan, and Dexter suddenly sees him not as an ally with rough edges, but as a liability that can't be fixed with more mentoring or another speech about channeling the dark passenger. To keep this clear, Dexter's first instinct is not to strike. It's to retreat. He starts rationing access, trimming back the late-night calls about justice, letting Miguel's invitations to drinks, strategy sessions, and our next project die in his voicemail. Conversations that used to spiral into investigations and killroom hypotheticals get redirected to safe topics. Rita's pregnancy, work at Miami Metro. The surface-level small talk of a normal life Dexter is trying to reassert as a boundary. On paper, this looks reasonable. Distance, de-escalation. Control, but with someone like Miguel, that withdrawal is not neutral. As a prosecutor and rising politician, he lives in a world where every pause, every delayed callback, every change in tone is a calculated move. So when Dexter pulls away, Miguel doesn't read burnout. He reads fear. What is his friend suddenly protecting? What part of the story has been edited out? We see it in the way Miguel starts closing the gap by force. He shows up uninvited at Dexter's office, at Rita's house, at odd hours that make the intrusion feel deliberate. He leans in with lines like, "Friends don't disappear when things get serious," turning casual phrases into veiled accusations. Each visit is a performance, a reminder that he knows something, that they share something, and that Dexter doesn't get to simply walk off stage. Along the way, Miguel's internal logic hardens. If Dexter is this desperate to cut the cord, then the secret underneath must be bigger than a single Fribo, bigger than one righteous confession in a cabin. More victims, more years, more risk. The psychology here is chilling. Miguel doesn't want less of Dexter's darkness. He wants the full inventory, the long-term pattern, the complete code he suspects has been operating for an entire season of Dexter's life and beyond. That's where Dexter's frustration spikes. Every polite no becomes another data point in Miguel's private investigation. Every attempt to cool things down only escalates Miguel's suspicion and possessiveness until what started as a partnership begins to feel like a hostage situation built on unspoken threats. Dexter, the master of compartmentalization, finds his usual tactic: controlled detachment, turning into evidence against him. And this is the central question Dexter runs up against. How do you ghost a man who has watched you kill, who believes you've been doing it for a very long time, and who sees your silence as leverage rather than distance? The irony is brutal. In this video, we're going to keep tracking how that irony forces Dexter into a final, irreversible conclusion. If withdrawal only tightens Miguel's grip, then the next move can't be emotional or conversational. It has to be operational. Dexter will start planning Miguel's removal, and that pivot will drag both men into a confrontation where they reveal, piece by piece, exactly how much of each other's darkness they've already mapped. So when Dexter pivots from managing Miguel to removing him, the whole game changes. This is not tracking a stranger in the dark. This is planning the death of the one person who has watched him work, asked the right questions, and already guessed that the Fribo incident was not a one-time lapse, but part of a long, bloody trajectory. Miguel knows Dexter's temperament. He's seen the calm before the kill at the cabin with Ethan. He's watched Dexter stalk, isolate, and execute under the language of the code. That means the stakes here are doubled. If Dexter fails operationally, he dies. If he slips psychologically, Miguel walks away with a fully articulated theory of who Dexter really is. The central question becomes, how do you kill the man who's been studying your methods as if he were building a case file? To keep this clear, Dexter's dilemma has two layers. On the surface, he needs a plan that satisfies Harry's code and leaves no trace. Underneath, he needs that plan to look nothing like their shared projects. No plastic-wrapped sheds. No late-night drives to the same industrial zones. No tools Miguel has already seen gleaming under fluorescent light. He has to design a kill that denies Miguel the satisfaction of recognition. So we watch Dexter do what he usually does to others. He surveils. He tracks Miguel's courthouse routines, his late-night visits to La Huerta, his secret meetings with the Skinner's associates. Every pattern is both an opportunity and a liability. Miguel is a high-profile prosecutor. A sudden disappearance triggers an investigation with cameras, witnesses, and political pressure. The usual abandoned lot won't cut it. The location has to be private, plausible, and disconnected from anything they've touched together. But here's the twist. While Dexter is watching Miguel's movements, Miguel is watching Dexter's mood. The focus is not just on who follows whom, but on how each man reads the other's absences. Miguel clocks Dexter's evasive answers, his tightened schedule, the way he retreats from their partnership. Every missed drink, every unexplained drive becomes data. Dual surveillance. Two predators circling, each trying to stay just outside the other's peripheral vision. Operationally, this forces Dexter into a stripped-down version of himself. No elaborate plastic cocoon. No wall of photos and trophies that might echo what Miguel already suspects. Even his language has to change. He can't repeat the same reassuring phrases about justice and the code. Because Miguel has heard those before, and now hears the control baked into them. Any familiar cadence could snap the whole performance in half. Internally, Dexter is rehearsing. He's not just planning a kill, he's planning a show. What does a man who has never done this before look like, when in reality he's done it hundreds of times? How do you fake inexperience when every muscle in your body wants to move with practiced efficiency? Along the way, we see the collapse of his illusion of total control. The performance exposes him even as it protects him. And that's the real risk. Any slip, a repeated gesture with the knife, a tarp folded the same way. A single tool Miguel recognizes from the cabin. Could be the missing puzzle piece that lets Miguel finally name Dexter as a serial killer. Planning a kill under that level of scrutiny is a high-wire act with no net. In this video, we're going to follow that act into the next phase, where Miguel starts to sense the danger and quietly mounts his own counterplan, turning Dexter's last safe option into the most exposed operation of his life. Miguel doesn't need hard evidence to know the weather has changed. He feels it. Dexter's visits get shorter. His confessions get vaguer. The warmth that once came with shared justice is replaced by a cool, forensic distance. To Miguel, this isn't subtle. It's the same shift he's seen 100 times in an investigation when a cooperating witness starts planning an exit strategy. Let's kick things off with Miguel's core intuition. People do not just drift away from him. They maneuver. So when Dexter stops sharing details about potential targets, when the talk about the code turns abstract instead of practical, Miguel reads it as preparation. Dexter is building a case. The central question for Miguel becomes simple and terrifying. If this man has a ritual for killing monsters, what box has he started putting me in? And this is where Miguel makes the move that flips the whole power dynamic. He takes Dexter's code and uses it offensively. He literally asks himself, if I were Dexter, how would I justify killing me? He knows the criteria: undeniable guilt, repeated harm, no legal remedy, emotional detachment. To keep this clear, Miguel starts mapping his own life against that algorithm, looking for every place Dexter could claim moral permission. Then, he begins to sand those rough edges down. Publicly, Miguel leans harder than ever into being a family man and community hero. We see him at charity events, hugging constituents, orchestrating photo ops with his wife and kids. He ramps up his visibility at the exact moment Dexter is trying to recast him as a secret liability. The focus is not just on image, it's on narrative. Miguel wants any story about him as a monster to sound absurd before Dexter even tells it. Behind the scenes, he stages alibis. Late nights that used to be free are suddenly full of staffers, phone calls, and witnesses. He makes sure there is always someone who can place him somewhere safe and boring. Every alibi is a preemptive strike against a future kill room. At the same time, Miguel engages in psychological warfare. He drops loaded comments about trust and betrayal, about how terrible it is when partners turn on each other. He looks Dexter in the eye and says, almost casually, that the worst sin is pretending to be on the same side while secretly plotting. Is he accusing? Is he warning? Miguel wants Dexter off balance, second-guessing his timing, his methods, even his right to act. Along the way, Miguel keeps probing for specifics. Over beers or in the quiet after a shared kill, he asks, "How do you know when someone is beyond saving? What if they've done bad things, but they're trying to do good now?" He isn't making small talk. He's reverse engineering the exact threshold that will trigger Dexter's lethal response. This is the inversion that makes Season 3 so volatile. Harry's code, designed as Dexter's safeguard, becomes a readable algorithm in Miguel's hands. What was supposed to impose control now telegraphs Dexter's every move. We see the consequences crystallize in a single narrow escape. Dexter invites Miguel to a secluded location under the pretense of sharing something important. Miguel feels the trap in the isolation, in Dexter's overly careful tone. So he declines at the last second, or, more devastatingly, he brings an unexpected third party. A staffer. A relative. Someone whose presence makes a kill impossible. Dexter's plan collapses before it starts. He has to smile, adapt, and walk away, knowing Miguel just dodged a setup that should have been invisible. For the first time, Dexter is hunting someone who is actively hunting his patterns in return. Every ritual becomes a tell. Every familiar step in his process is now a liability that Miguel can anticipate, disrupt, or expose. In this video, we're going to watch Dexter's response to that pressure, as he's forced to abandon pieces of his own ritual just to keep up, revealing how desperate and reckless his trajectory has truly become. So now we watch the thing Dexter trusts most begin to betray him. The ritual that once guaranteed control starts cracking under Miguel's pressure, and with every fracture. Miguel sees more of the man behind the mask. When the plan is to live by a script, what happens when someone keeps ripping out pages in real time? Let's kick things off with Dexter's frustration. His standard sequence is almost liturgical. Stalk the target, confirm the victims, prepare the kill room. Plastic, photos, restraints, a speech, a cut. But with Miguel in the picture, that clean triad keeps collapsing. Miguel shows up unannounced. He asks the wrong questions. He pushes for faster justice. Dexter is used to hunting. Now he's being hunted by someone tracking his patterns. And that forces him into improvisation he is psychologically not built for. We see it in the compromises. The night he brings Miguel to watch him take out Ethan, the Skinner's associate, the location is already a concession. A remote cabin, not one of Dexter's meticulously scouted urban shells. Less control over who might stumble in, less control over evidence. He rushes the prep, trims back the plastic, abbreviates the confrontation. The code says verify, isolate, ritualize. Under Miguel's gaze, it becomes grab, restrain, finish. That speed feels like power to Miguel. To us, it reads like operational failure. To keep this clear, the ritual is not just a quirk of Dexter's psychology. It's an evolved security system. Every step he normally takes, double-checking the victim's file, wiping every surface, dismembering. Ocean dumping is there because some earlier investigation almost caught him. When he skips a layer of plastic, uses a less controlled dump site, or leaves a tool where it shouldn't be, he's not just breaking habit. He's opening doors for Miguel to walk through. We get a near-exposure moment when Dexter, on edge after Ellen Wolf's murder, almost references his preferred method of dismemberment while Miguel is riffing about making people disappear. Dexter lets slip a line about how tubs are easier to clean, a detail that sounds like experience, not theory. Miguel clocks it. Dexter backpedals with a clumsy joke about watching too many crime shows. The lie lands, but not cleanly. We can see the question hang in Miguel's eyes. How many times has this man practiced cleanup? From Miguel's perspective, he doesn't see the full ritual, but he sees the agitation around it. The way Dexter bristles when Miguel suggests a spontaneous kill, the obsession with proper conditions, the insistence that there is a right way and a wrong way to do this. No one invents that level of control overnight. This looks like a long, standing pattern, a season after season rehearsal of the same dark performance. Along the way, Dexter is forced into an internal recalibration. The central question shifts from how do I keep the code intact to how do I become unreadable again. He realizes the very consistency that once protected him now makes his trajectory predictable to the one ally turned threat who's been paying attention. When the ritual cracks, the mask cracks with it. The more he fumbles, the more Miguel glimpses the predator underneath the polite blood analyst. By the end of this phase, the image of a crumbling ritual becomes the image of a cornered animal. To truly escape Miguel's investigation, Dexter understands he may have to do something he's never done. Abandon not just pieces of the ritual, but the fantasy that his worlds can stay separate. In the next turn, that means designing a confrontation where neither man can pretend anymore, and where only one of their codes walks out alive. So when Dexter designs that confrontation, he doesn't pick a kill room, he picks a stage. A place where both masks can still, theoretically, be worn. A rooftop, a quiet corner of a parking structure, the kind of semi-private space that belongs to the city but feels temporarily owned by two men who know they might be seeing each other as friends for the last time. The air is open. The conversation is not. Miguel arrives with that prosecutor swagger dialed down just enough to read his concern. Dexter offers the usual small talk about work, about the Skinner investigation, about Rita. It lasts maybe 30 seconds. Then, Miguel cuts through it. Short sentence. Direct hit. You've been holding out on me, Dexter, in this video. We're going to keep coming back to that shift, the moment polite words stop matching the violence underneath. The dialogue turns into a chess match about loyalty and control. Miguel frames it as hurt feelings first. Why wasn't he told everything about Fribo? Why did Dexter move on Ellen Wolf without trusting him? Underneath those questions is the central question. Who is actually calling the shots here? Dexter tries to retreat to the narrative he built, the plan where Miguel is the volatile student and he's the calm teacher managing the dark passenger through the code. Miguel doesn't buy it. He starts referencing patterns the way a closing argument stacks evidence. Guys who just disappear when you're on the case. Files that suddenly resolve when forensics says there's nothing left to find. He never says, you're a serial killer. He doesn't have to. To keep this clear, Miguel is laying out the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation without the label, showing he understands that Dexter is not a one-time vigilante, but an ongoing system. Dexter responds with gaslighting and minimization. He leans on coincidence, on the chaos of Miami crime, on the idea that Miguel is under stress and seeing connections that aren't there. For a moment, the fade holds. Then, Miguel twists the knife. He starts talking about what he could tell LaGuerta, what he could hint to Deb, how a respected Ada describing a pattern might kick off a new investigation. How much damage could a man like that do with just a few carefully placed doubts? That's when the masks fall off completely. Miguel stops pretending they share a moral mission. He talks about Dexter's talent as leverage, an asset, a weapon they can deploy against anyone who crosses them. No more language about justice, no more grief for Oscar. Just power, just the thrill of having a killer on speed dial. In that instant, Dexter pivots internally. There is no rehabilitating this relationship. no resetting boundaries or tightening the code. Miguel has seen too much, inferred too much, and is perfectly willing to weaponize that knowledge. The tragic part is that this is exactly what Dexter thought he wanted. Someone who could see him clearly and not run. Instead, he's created the only enemy who can describe him accurately. The conversation ends without a threat spoken aloud, but both men hear it. Only one version of justice is walking away from this. And as we move into the kill itself, the focus is not just on physical danger, but on Dexter trying to erase the only man who ever understood him well enough to make his entire life story collapsible with a few sentences. By the time that unspoken threat hangs between them, Miguel's not just guessing anymore. He's built a working model of Dexter Morgan. Let's kick things off by tracking that trajectory. Miguel starts as a grieving brother who feels something off about this quiet blood spatter guy who just happens to be at the center of Oscar's case. Fribo disappears. Dexter's story keeps almost matching the evidence, but not quite. That's the first fracture in Miguel's belief in normal explanations. The first hint that Dexter's different in a way the legal system can't file. From there, the investigation becomes personal. Dexter stages that controlled confession about killing Fribo in self-defense, a one-time loss of control dressed up as justice. Miguel hears something else. He hears intent, planning, a man who can kill and then walk back into the precinct as if nothing happened. When Dexter finally lets him into a real kill, when Miguel watches Ethan's life drain out in that cabin, the hypothesis hardens into fact. To keep this clear, Miguel has confirmed 3 core elements. 1. Dexter is willing to kill outside the law, deliberately and calmly. 2. He follows a consistent code. Targets are killers the system can't or won't punish, not random victims. 3. This isn't Dexter's first time. The ritual, the plastic, the precision, the absolute lack of panic all scream repetition. Miguel doesn't know the body count, but he knows this is a long-running operation, not a sudden collapse. From patterns, he extrapolates even more. Dexter leaves clean scenes. No prints, no fibers, no witnesses. Bodies vanish or reappear in ways that baffle normal procedure. And crucially, Dexter's position in forensics is not an accident. Miguel realizes it's both camouflage and hunting ground, a place where Dexter can study investigations, identify failures, and plug the gaps with his own lethal solutions. Who better to exploit the system than the man reading every case file? There are gray zones. Miguel likely doesn't know about the bloodslide trophies, the shipping container trauma, or Harry's full psychology experiment behind the code. He doesn't need them. The focus is not just on Dexter's origin story, but on the functional truth. Dexter is a parallel justice system, a one-man death penalty operating in the shadows of Miami. In Miguel's conceptual model, Dexter is not a tabloid serial killer. He's a resource, a weapon, someone who can be pointed at Ellen Wolf or anyone else Miguel decides deserves to die. That's the tragic irony. Miguel admires the very thing that makes Dexter monstrous. His faith in Dexter's power blinds him to the central question he should be asking. What happens when I break the code that keeps this monster aimed away from me? And that's what makes Miguel uniquely dangerous. If he talks, he won't just say, Dexter's a killer. He can articulate method, selection criteria, institutional cover, all in the precise language that makes investigators listen. In this video, we're going to follow how close he comes to saying the full sentence out loud before Dexter is forced into his most personal damage control plan yet. Because the real question isn't just how Miguel discovered the secret, it's how narrowly Dexter prevents the only complete witness to his true nature from turning that knowledge into the final, irreversible collapse of his control. So when does Dexter realize Miguel isn't just listening, he's studying? It doesn't happen in a big confrontation. It happens in the quiet, in the leftover space, after the plan is supposedly done. Late night. The two of them sit in the dim light. After a strategy talk about the Skinner. The air still thick with adrenaline. Dexter reaches for his beer, makes some offhand comment about needing sleep, and Miguel doesn't answer. He just watches. His eyes don't drift, they track. Every micro-reaction, every pause, as if Dexter's face is a crime scene and he's waiting for the body to move. This is where Miguel's prosecutor brain quietly shifts gears. In court, he builds narratives, witness statements, timelines, motive. With Dexter, he starts doing the same thing without saying it out loud. Fribo's house. Oscar's death. Dexter's oddly precise knowledge of where monsters hide. Miguel begins to treat each interaction like testimony, each confession like an exhibit. He isn't cross-examining yet, but he's logging everything. To keep this clear, we can track it through the continuity errors Dexter starts to hear in Miguel's questions. Miguel circles back to the Fribo story, but changes the angle. You said you found him in the bathroom, right? Dexter never said bathroom. Or later, Miguel asks, so when you wrapped him up, what were you thinking? Wrapped, not killed, not fought. A word that belongs to someone who knows about plastic. Those oddly specific follow-ups are the tell. Miguel references the way Dexter channels his anger, even though Dexter only framed it once, vaguely, in the moonlit confession about Oscar. He calls back to details Dexter left implied, not spoken. That's when the central question flips for Dexter. Not can I trust Miguel, but how much has he already reconstructed without me? Internally, Dexter pivots. He stops reading Miguel as a volatile ally and starts categorizing him like a future witness, a man already halfway down the trajectory toward the truth. In this video, we're going to see that this is the moment the friendship turns into an investigation, running in both directions. Dexter's damage control instinct kicks in. He overcompensates with normalcy. Extra jokes at the station. Forced small talk about Rita and the baby. He starts planting mundane details, rewriting his own origin story into something less ritualized, less coded. But Miguel is doing his own rewrite. On his side, he's mentally cross-referencing everything. Dexter's eye lost control with Fribo. The cabin kill with Ethan. The shared thrill of hunting someone who deserves it. He reverse engineers a rough psychological profile. This isn't a man who snapped once. This is a man with a structure. And here's the paradox. The more Dexter tries to look harmless, the more visible that structure becomes. The careful word choices. The rehearsed morality of the code. Miguel can feel the discipline under the performance. A pattern too consistent to be casual. Each major section will show us that when Dexter leans on performance, he leaves a trail. It all crystallizes in one small, chilling echo. Miguel leans in, almost affectionate, and says, "You were right, Hermano, you have to. Channel the darkness." Word for word. Dexter's phrase, handed back to him like a sworn statement, proof that Miguel hasn't just heard the script. He's memorizing it. And that memorization does something dangerous. It sends Miguel back to the beginning of the story he thought he already understood. Oscar, Fribo, and the night everything collapsed. Originally, the narrative was clean. Oscar Prado, respected cop. Fribo, low-level dealer turned murderer. A drug deal gone bad. A struggle. Oscar dead on a filthy floor, while Fribo disappears into Miami's heat. Miguel builds his entire grief on that plan of events. A simple villain, a simple loss, and a righteous, lifelong investigation to balance the scales. Then, Dexter confesses. Not to being a serial killer, to killing Fribo, to avenging Oscar in a moment of chaotic self-defense. It's framed as closure, as a gift. But it plants a seed Miguel can't pull out. If Dexter was there, really there, what else was he not saying? To keep this clear, we have to track the little fractures Miguel keeps circling. The timing of Dexter's presence at Fribo's place. The fact that no one ever gets real forensic closure on Fribo's body. The way Dexter's supposed accident just happens to resolve the one case Miguel is emotionally welded to. These are not wild conspiracy boards yet. They're quiet, nagging mismatches between the official story and the man who keeps repeating it. Miguel starts replaying Dexter's version like a deposition transcript, line by line, beat by beat. Where does Dexter get specific? Where does he go vague? He notices how Dexter leans hard on broad emotional beats. I wanted to help you. I couldn't let him hurt anyone else, while the concrete details blur. How close was Fribo when you stabbed him? How many times? Where exactly did he fall? Dexter's answers feel rehearsed, smoothed, as if the psychology of the moment has been polished for maximum impact, while the facts stay conveniently out of focus, and grief makes that focus ruthless. Miguel's not a neutral observer. He's a brother who needs Oscar's death to mean something. A random drug deal gone wrong is spiritual static. A complex, intentional narrative, a hidden avenger stepping in where the system failed, that's intoxicating. The central question becomes not did Dexter kill Fribo, but what kind of man kills Fribo like that and then hides it? So, Miguel runs a quiet experiment. No confrontation, no grand speech. Along the way, in casual conversations about Oscar, he slips in peripheral questions about the scene, the timeline, the investigation. He pretends it's nostalgia or guilt. Really, he's testing Dexter's consistency, checking whether the script ever changes. Dexter's response pattern gives him more than he expects. Dexter keeps defaulting to the same emotional summary, the same moral headline, as if that's the part that can't be touched. When Miguel presses for specifics, Dexter deflects, redirects, or wraps the gap in empathy. The focus is not just on what Dexter says, but what he protects. And Miguel reads protection as confirmation. He doesn't jump straight to serial killer. That leap would break his world too fast. Instead, he lands on a more seductive answer. Dexter as vigilante, the man who avenged Oscar when the system couldn't. It feels righteous. It feels personal. It gives Miguel's pain a trajectory instead of a void. That's how we end up with Miguel alone in his office late at night, the lights low. Case files on Oscar and Fribo spread across his desk like a crime scene of paper. He flips through photos, reports, transcripts, then pulls a pen and writes one new name in the margin. Not as a suspect, as the central, unexplained variable, Dexter. And once that name is on the page, the next plan almost writes itself. So, when Miguel writes Dexter's name in the margin, the next step isn't a confrontation. It's field work. Observation. The prosecutor in him doesn't chase a hunch. He builds a case. And the place that case really starts is in a kill room we already know too well. Let's kick things off from Miguel's perspective in that remote cabin, when they take out Ethan, the Skinner's associate. From the moment Miguel steps through the door, the world narrows. Plastic sheeting on every surface, duct tape edges folded down perfectly, tools laid out on a table in a precise line, knives, tape, rolls of extra plastic, the syringe. It doesn't feel like improvisation. It feels like walking into a precedent that's been set many times before. Dexter moves through the space with total control. He explains the plan in calm, measured language, like he's walking a jury through an exhibit. where Ethan will be restrained, when he'll wake up, how the confession will be extracted. Miguel notices the phrasing. Dexter doesn't say, "if this works." He says, "this is how it works." Present tense. Established pattern. As Ethan wakes and starts to panic, Dexter's voice shifts into something Miguel recognizes from his own life, closing argument mode. He lays out Ethan's crimes step by step, establishes motive, method, impact on victims. Then presses for a confession, not because he needs it to know Ethan is guilty, but because the ritual demands it. Evidence, confession, verdict, sentence. To keep this clear, in Miguel's legal mind, Dexter has essentially turned the cabin into a one-man courtroom. The focus is not just on what Dexter does, but on how he does it every time. Plastic barrier. Immobilize the witness. Present the case. Secure the admission. Deliver the punishment. Clean the scene. Miguel starts clocking these beats, feeling the rhythm under the violence. How many times do you rehearse something before it looks this effortless? And then there's Dexter himself. No shaking hands, no adrenaline crash, no giddy high. Miguel sees a man in his element, almost meditative, as if the kill is less a spike of chaos and more a practiced craft. That calm is its own kind of evidence. First-timers don't look like that. Career practitioners do. Along the way, Dexter makes the crucial slip. Trying to reassure Miguel, he explains that he doesn't kill just anyone, that there's a system, a code Harry taught him. He outlines criteria, thresholds, rules. He frames it as ethics, as control, but to Miguel's analytical brain, it lands as doctrine. You don't build a moral infrastructure this detailed for one or two revenge kills. You build it to sustain a lifestyle. From that night on, Miguel starts testing. In idle conversation, he floats names that don't quite fit Dexter's stated standards. What about a dirty, but not murderous cop? What about Ellen Wolf, the defense attorney who lets monsters walk? Each time, he watches Dexter's eyes, listens for hesitation, looking for the edges of the code. By the time Dexter is meticulously peeling plastic off cabin walls, wiping every surface, packing tools in a specific order, Miguel's certainty hardens. The cover-up is as ritualized as the kill. This isn't a man who stumbled into darkness. This is a man who's been living there for years. And Miguel walks out of that cabin knowing he hasn't just found a weapon. He's found a pattern he can learn, bend, and eventually try to own. By the time Miguel steps out of that cabin, plastic and bleach still in his nose, Ellen Wolf is already forming in his mind, not as a name on a file, but as a wound. A defense attorney who keeps scum on the street, a public critic of his office, a woman who embarrassed him in open court. Through Miguel's eyes, she isn't just a lawyer. She's every criminal he watched walk away. So when he brings Ellen to Dexter, it's not casual. It's a test. He frames her like a case study in necessary evil. The clients she's helped escape consequences, the technicalities she's exploited, the families he says she's destroyed. To keep this clear, Miguel isn't presenting evidence. He's building a story. He's watching Dexter's face the whole time, measuring every flicker. Can this weapon he's found be pointed wherever he wants? Dexter feels the friction immediately. Ellen doesn't fit the code. No confirmed kills. No secret torture room. No blood-soaked trophies. Just a ruthless advocate operating in a broken system. The central question for Dexter is simple. Is she a killer or just someone Miguel hates? And the more Miguel talks, the more the answer tilts toward personal vendetta. We watch the argument disguised as strategy. Miguel leans on emotion, the grieving families, the headlines, the message her death would send. Dexter counters with cold criteria, no body count, no clear pattern, no moral certainty. Short sentence. Short sentence. Longer elaboration. Dexter keeps returning to the plan, the rules Harry drilled into him, because the moment he lets one exception through, the entire structure of control starts to wobble. For Miguel, this is infuriating. From his perspective, Ellen is the purest example of the rot he spent his career fighting. How can this man, who butchers human traffickers and gang leaders, suddenly grow squeamish over a lawyer? When Dexter finally, actually refuses, we see something break in Miguel. This isn't decorative language anymore. The code is real. It has teeth, and those teeth are pointed at him. That's the psychological pivot. If the code can deny him the justice he craves, then the code isn't a safeguard. It's an obstacle. Dexter slides, in Miguel's mind, from savior to gatekeeper. From liberator of his rage to bureaucrat of murder. How long before Miguel asks, why should Harry's rules, this dead cop's private investigation into Dexter's psychology, dictate what he can or cannot do? So Miguel lies. Calm voice, easy smile, he tells Dexter he'll back off Ellen, that he understands the boundaries. But the eyes give it away. Along the way, we've seen Dexter lie to protect his secret. Now we watch Miguel adopt the same tool to escape Dexter's control. As Miguel walks away, posture relaxed, but gaze burning, the trajectory shifts. This is the first moment he's not planning with Dexter, but around him. And Ellen Wolf has just become the fault line that will crack their entire alliance. That relaxed posture is the tell. Miguel walks away from Dexter, but psychologically, he's walking toward something else, experiment mode. Up to this point, he's been a passionate ally, a grieving prosecutor who latches on to Dexter's plan as a twisted form of justice. Now, he starts treating Dexter himself like a case, a live investigation. Let's kick things off with that shift from spectator to tester. In their early talks, Miguel echoes Dexter's language about monsters who deserve it. After Ellen Wolf becomes the fault line, those conversations change. The hypotheticals get murkier. What about a cop who plants evidence? A judge who takes bribes? A defense attorney who frees killers but never actually pulls a trigger? Miguel isn't just venting. He's introducing gray zones, one by one, and watching Dexter like a cross-examined witness. We see it in his eyes at those late-night rooftop chats. Miguel floats a scenario, then goes quiet. Dexter pushes back with the code. Only killers, only certainty, only what Harry would allow. Miguel waits for the micro-flinch, the half-second delay, the way Dexter's jaw tightens when the code is pressed. The focus is not just on the content of Dexter's answer, but on the psychology behind how fast and how hard he defends it. Is this principle, or is this panic? To keep this clear, Miguel doesn't ask these questions randomly. He starts timing them. After a brutal day at the lab, after a body turns up that almost links back to Dexter, after a close call with the Skinner investigation. Miguel appears with drinks and sympathetic eyes. He knows lowered defenses mean looser lips. If Dexter's control is going to crack, it will be when the day has already shaken his illusion of safety. Flattery becomes Miguel's favorite scalpel. He tells Dexter he's the only truly moral man in Miami, praises the code as genius, calls it a higher law than the courtroom. But then he reframes it as flexible, something a true friend could be trusted to bend. Isn't real justice adapting the rules when the system fails? Isn't rigidity just another kind of cowardice? Miguel inflates Dexter's ego, while quietly sawing at the legs of the very structure that ego stands on. Dexter feels it, the growing discomfort, the sense of being studied. He's used to stalking. Now he's the one under surveillance. That inversion triggers his survival instincts. His answers get shorter, his explanations more rehearsed. Each major section will show Dexter as the hunter. Here, he starts deflecting like prey. It all crystallizes at a key dinner scene. Miguel casually brings up famous unsolved cases, carving his steak while he carves into Dexter's identity. How would someone like you handle this cartel boss who ordered deaths but never pulled the trigger? What about that dirty cop who got off on a technicality? The phrase is thinly veiled, and both men know it. Miguel is asking Dexter to imagine the kill room without the code. Along the way, Miguel isolates the central question: what can Dexter live with breaking? When Dexter's face hardens at non-murderers, when his voice catches around Ellen Wolf's name, Miguel finally sees it. The weak spot isn't anger or pride, it's the code itself. Attack the code, and you don't just challenge Dexter's plan, you threaten the entire narrative that keeps his world from collapse. By the end of this probing phase, Miguel has a mental map, a private chart of red lines and pressure points. And he's not cataloging those boundaries to honor them. He's memorizing exactly where to push when he decides Dexter's rules need to die before Dexter does. And that's exactly where the turn happens. Once Miguel finishes mapping Dexter's boundaries, the next logical step in his psychology is to test them in the dark, without warning and without permission. We open on Miguel walking toward Dexter in that familiar post-hunt posture. Late night, parking lot shadows, the same rhythm as every debrief they've had since their first shared kill. But this time, there's a difference. His story arrives prepackaged. He has a lead, a supposed monster who slipped through the legal cracks, and he delivers it with the smooth cadence of a closing argument instead of the messy uncertainty of a real investigation. To keep this clear, Dexter has heard Miguel process real cases before. Real cases sprawl. They have contingencies, doubts, alternate suspects. What Miguel offers now is a straight line. He found the guy, followed him, confronted him, and somehow everything resolved off-screen. No paperwork, no mention of warrants, no reference to who else in the office knows. For a career prosecutor, that absence is deafening. This is where Dexter's day job quietly takes the wheel. Years of reconstructing scenes from blood and trajectory have trained him to hear narrative the same way he reads a spatter pattern. Impact, direction, void. He listens to Miguel's account, and what jumps out isn't what's there. It's what isn't. No timestamps, no chain of custody, no sensory detail about the scene itself. For someone who once obsessed over Ellen Wolf's motions and filings, Miguel suddenly has no legal texture at all. So, Dexter notices. The timeline doesn't quite fit where Miguel claims to have been. The supposed surveillance window overlaps with a moment Dexter knows Miguel was on the phone. The steps Miguel describes skip right past the boring but necessary grind of an actual investigation. The central question becomes unavoidable. Is Miguel describing a hunt or retrofitting a story around a kill he's already committed on his own terms? Miguel feels that scrutiny, and he compensates the only way he knows how. He leans hard into emotion, rage at the system. Brotherhood with Dexter. He locks eyes, grabs shoulders, repeats how men like us have to act when the code of law fails. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to this move. When facts get thin, Miguel reaches for feeling. It's not just manipulation, it's his way of reasserting control over the narrative. Dexter plays along. Outwardly, inwardly, the calculus shifts. He doesn't confront Miguel. Not yet. Instead, he silently tags this moment as the first confirmed instance of Miguel going off book, of treating the code as optional fine print rather than structural law. And then Dexter does something very Dexter. He tests the story like evidence. Gentle, pointed follow-ups disguised as concern. Where exactly did you pick him up? Which alley? How long did you watch him? Each question forces Miguel to improvise, to deepen the lie, to stack inconsistencies like unstable boxes. Along the way, the power dynamic inverts. Earlier in the season, Miguel held the moral high ground, the righteous prosecutor dragging Dexter into the light of justice. Now Dexter holds a different kind of leverage, private knowledge that Miguel is lying, freelancing, and treating their partnership as cover. We end with Dexter alone, replaying every word. The neat story, the missing steps, the emotional overdrive. If Miguel is willing to fabricate one kill, how many are already buried beyond Dexter's sight? At that point, the partnership stops being a shared plan and starts looking like a liability he will eventually have to solve the only way he knows how. That realization flips a switch for Miguel. If Dexter might be lying about one kill, what else is he editing out? Friendly curiosity stops being enough. A prosecutor's instinct takes over. He doesn't want stories anymore. He wants evidence. So he does what he's trained to do. He opens an investigation without ever calling it that. To keep this clear, Miguel doesn't storm around with accusations. He sits in his office late, the lights low, pulling up old case numbers on his computer, casually flagging any file where Dexter Morgan blood spatter appears in the reports. On paper, it looks like prep for trial strategy. In his head, it's the first draft of a Dexter timeline. We watch the pattern emerge in real time. A home invasion where the prime suspect vanished before arrest. A gang shooting where the likely triggerman went to ground and never resurfaced. A domestic abuser, a suspected rapist, a low-level enforcer for the Skinner's network. Different seasons, different crimes, but the same strange rhythm. Dexter processes the scene. The trail heats up, then suddenly cools. No arrest, no body, no closure, just a quiet collapse of momentum. The central question for Miguel becomes simple and terrifying. How many of these disappearances happened within Dexter's reach? Along the way, he starts cross-referencing. His assistant thinks he's just being meticulous as he asks for duty rosters, overtime logs, and incident reports. But Miguel is mapping overlap. Where was Dexter on the night this suspect fled? Who logged the evidence on the case where the lead evaporated? How often does Dexter's name appear within 24 hours of a criminal falling off the grid? It's not proof, yet it's too much coincidence for a man who believes in patterns. So Miguel takes it off the screen and into the field, under the pretense of dropping off a motion or checking in on a joint task force. He drifts through Miami Metro, lingering near the bullpen, watching Dexter move. The way colleagues wave at him without really looking. The way Batista jokes, Mosca overshares, Deb swears, and Dexter just absorbs it. No one asks Dexter about his weekend. No one vents to him about their divorce. He's central to their investigation flow and emotionally peripheral at the same time. A ghost at the whiteboard. For Miguel, that anonymity is not a quirk, it's a red flag. How does a man in the middle of so many violent cases leave almost no personal footprint? From there, Miguel's psychology turns backward, toward origin. Foster care. A murdered mother. Harry Morgan stepping in as savior and mentor. If Harry could shape Dexter into a brilliant analyst, why couldn't he also have shaped a private code, a personal system for dealing with the monsters who slip through legal cracks Miguel knows all too well? By the end of this quiet montage, Miguel has something tangible. A thin, unofficial folder, labeled only Dexter Morgan, slid into his briefcase. It's not a case file yet. It's a hypothesis with teeth, waiting for the one piece of proof that will either vindicate him or blow everything apart. That unofficial file in Miguel's briefcase doesn't stay theoretical for long. The next time we see them alone, the investigation has handed Miguel a gift, a particularly brutal offender who slipped through on a technicality. Perfect small talk for a prosecutor and a blood guy, right? They're in a quiet corner of the courthouse, fluorescent lights humming, case folders stacked like failed promises. Miguel lays out the details: the victim's injuries, the torture, the way the body was left, staged almost theatrically. As he talks, he's not just venting, he's watching. Measuring, waiting, Dexter listens, head tilted, eyes steady. For a beat, he's too steady. We see it before Miguel does, that infinitesimal lean forward, the way his gaze narrows, tracking the violence, not as horror, but as data. His pupils don't flinch. They sharpen. It's the look of a predator scenting a familiar trail. To keep this clear, what flashes across Dexter's face is not disgust, not fear, not even righteous anger. It's engagement, focus, a kind of clinical anticipation. Miguel spent his career reading juries, witnesses, hostile cops on the stand. He knows what revulsion looks like. He knows what moral outrage looks like. This is neither. So he pushes. Casually, he adds another detail: the way the killer adjusted his method from victim to victim, the precision of the ligatures, how the scene suggested practice, pattern, almost craft. Miguel is baiting the hook, and he knows it. We can feel the plan forming in real time. If Dexter is what I think he is, this will pull him closer. Dexter slips. Just a fraction, but enough. He responds a little too fast, voice a shade too interested. He starts breaking down the criminal's patterns with the ease of someone who has stood where that man stood. He notes how the escalation suggests control, how the staging indicates a code, how the offender probably felt invincible after beating the system once. There's a thin thread of admiration in there, not for the man, but for the methodology. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to these moments where Dexter's mask fractures under pressure. This is one of the smallest and one of the most decisive, because Miguel hears it. He hears the respect for the craft buried inside the condemnation. The focus is not just on what Miguel learns, but on how it rewrites his entire psychology around Dexter. Part of him recoils. Part of him is in awe. This isn't just a man who hunts monsters. On some level, he mirrors them, understands their trajectory from inside the urge, not outside the law. By the end of the conversation, Dexter has pulled the harmless lab geek persona back over himself, talking about evidence, procedure, consequences. But for Miguel, the collapse has already begun. He can no longer fully accept Dexter as a reluctant hero dragged into darkness by necessity. He sees a wolf who has mastered sheep's clothing, a killer whose control is an act, not a truth. They fall silent. Miguel holds Dexter's gaze a second too long, the air thick with unspoken recognition. Dexter looks back, sensing something has shifted, but not yet knowing how badly. It's a quiet stare, loaded and dangerous, and it hangs there like a question we'll spend the rest of the season answering. Now that Miguel has seen the predator in Dexter's eyes, what will he do with that knowledge? That stare in the dark doesn't just bind them. It sets the stage for the first kill that proves how far apart they really are. When Ellen Wolf disappears, we experience it the way Dexter does, as background noise that suddenly becomes a blaring alarm. A prominent defense attorney misses a meeting. Her car is found abandoned. The investigation hums along like any other missing persons case. But then the body turns up, and Dexter walks that scene with a very specific dread. Something about the blood, the fibers, the absence of chaos feels familiar, and yet wrong. On paper, it looks like a controlled abduction and execution. No obvious struggle, limited trace, an attempt to manage the environment. That should be Dexter's language of control. But the dialect is off. The plastic remnants are unevenly cut, Tape residue lingers in places Dexter would never leave exposed. There's no coherent ritual, just fragments of one, like someone tried to reverse engineer a kill room from memory. To keep this clear, what we're seeing is not a copy of Dexter's code, but a copy of his technique without the ethics Harry tried to bolt onto it. The central question hits hard. Who else even knows enough to imitate him? As he catalogs the scene, Dexter's psychology shifts from curiosity to horror. The victim profile is the first red flag. Ellen is not a predator in his sense. She's a defense attorney who embarrassed Miguel in court. That makes her a personal enemy, not a moral target. This is a vendetta, not a correction. From there, the forensic tells stack up. Blood spatter suggests she was restrained, but not fully immobilized. The cleanup is partial, almost rushed. There are trace footprints where there should be none, inconsistent bleach patterns, and a disposal method that doesn't match any established serial trajectory in Miami. In this video, we're going to keep returning to this gap between intention and outcome, and Ellen's death is a perfect case study. Miguel has watched Dexter work. He's seen the plastic, the knives, the calm. Now he's tried to run the plan solo, and the result is a bastardized ritual that exposes exactly how dangerous he's become. Publicly, Miguel plays the grieving crusader. He calls Ellen's murder an attack on justice, grandstands for the cameras, weaponizes outrage. But Dexter sees the micro-expressions we're trained to notice, the flicker of satisfaction, the controlled breathing, the way Miguel lingers on certain details like he's revisiting them, not discovering them. Isn't that a confession without words? When Dexter finally probes him in private, he tests the waters, not the facts. Casual questions about the timeline, offhand comments about Ellen's enemies. Miguel's reaction is explosive, disproportionate, and revealing. He pivots to accusation, to wounded friendship, to how dare you, which tells us more than any admission would. Guilty men fear evidence. Miguel fears scrutiny. Along the way, the power dynamic flips. Miguel now knows he doesn't need Dexter in the room to kill. He can improvise his own version of the system, cut corners, indulge grudges, and still mostly get away with it. That makes him exponentially more volatile, because there is no code restraining him, only appetite. Dexter's internal verdict crystallizes. This isn't an ally spinning out. This is a rogue variable contaminating the code itself. And in Dexter's world, once someone reaches that status, there's only one place they can end up, on his table, as a future target he's already beginning to plan for. And then, almost overnight, Miguel changes. Not into a broken man weighed down by what he's done, but into something sharper, brighter, disturbingly alive. After Ellen Wolf's murder, we expect more guilt, more late-night spirals about Oscar. Instead, we get Miguel gliding into the office with his shoulders back, tie loose, and this unnerving lightness, as if a burden has been lifted instead of created. He starts talking about cleaning up the city with a new, almost evangelical zeal. Earlier in the season, the speeches were wrapped in grief, Oscar's name, the system's failure, the promise that no other family would suffer like his. Now the language shifts. It's about destiny, about what he and Dexter are meant to do, about a plan that transcends the law, because they are the law. To keep this clear, Miguel is no longer appealing to justice. He's appealing to his own sense of importance. We see it in the small, chilling details. Miguel lingers over crime scene photos in his office a little too long, thumb brushing the edges like he's savoring them. He watches news reports about bodies found and doesn't just look relieved the investigation is stalled. He looks pleased, almost proprietary. Like these headlines are performance reviews he's acing. From a who once raged at technicalities, he becomes a man quietly thrilled that the system can't touch him. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to that gap between what Dexter thinks he's teaching and what his students actually absorb. Miguel reads his own office as armor. He talks about being untouchable, about how no one would ever suspect the Golden Boy prosecutor, about how, if anything goes wrong, he has Dexter's forensics knowledge and their shared secret as leverage. He believes he can control Dexter, or expose him if necessary. That fantasy of control is its own kind of collapse. Dexter watches all of this with a very specific dread. The thrill of the hunt, the satisfaction of control, the way Miguel's eyes light up when he talks about targets. These are patterns Dexter recognizes in his own psychology, but without the stabilizing fiction of a code. No rules, no careful investigation, just appetite dressed up as destiny. The central question becomes, what happens when someone like Dexter exists without even the illusion of restraint? The answer surfaces in one casual conversation that should feel routine, and instead lands like a siren. Miguel floats new categories, not just killers or abusers, but problems. A defense attorney who embarrasses him, a witness who might recant, a gang member who hasn't killed yet but will, eventually. Why wait? Why not be proactive? In that moment, the mission quietly mutates from vigilante justice into preemptive, personal housekeeping. And Dexter finally sees it clearly. Miguel isn't just copying his ritual, he's revising the code into something chaotic and self-serving, a trajectory that only points toward escalation. The focus is not just on the bodies, but on the way Miguel basks in the power, soaking in the secrecy, convinced he's above consequences. As Dexter studies him across a room, watching that intoxicated smile, he understands this is no longer a man he can redirect with a stern lecture about rules. This is a future adversary. And in Dexter's world, adversaries only exit one way. So Dexter does what he always does when a relationship tips toward danger. He reframes it as an investigation. Instinct isn't enough anymore. That uneasy read on Miguel's intoxicated smile has to become evidence, patterns, a case he can actually argue to his own code. Let's kick things off with that shift in psychology. Up to this point, Dexter has been relying on a feeling. Miguel is out of control. But the central question for him is never just, is this person dangerous? It's, can I justify what I'm planning to do? So he starts treating Miguel the way Miguel once treated him, like a suspect whose trajectory needs to be reconstructed, step by step. That means going back to scenes that feel wrong. Alleyways where the violence is too personal, dump sites where the timing overlaps perfectly with Miguel's late nights. Dexter walks those spaces the way we've seen him walk countless crime scenes. But now he's looking for Miguel's fingerprints, literal or metaphorical, a missing piece of tape that matches Miguel's preferred evidence bags, a knot tied the way Miguel watched him tie it in the cabin, tiny echoes of his own ritual, clumsily imitated. To keep this clear, Dexter doesn't abandon his day job, he weaponizes it. In the lab, he starts cross-checking Miguel's case history. Which prosecutions suddenly evaporated once Miguel took an interest? Which slam-dunk cases ended in suspiciously neat resolutions, where the defendant turns up dead or the witness vanishes? On paper, it looks like a prosecutor cleaning up the streets. Under Dexter's microscope, it looks like a pattern of freelance justice. And because paper trails can still lie, he goes back to the oldest tool in his arsenal, surveillance. Night after night, he tails Miguel, hanging back at just the right distance, watching him circle potential targets. A wife-beater Miguel argued with in court, a gang member who walked on a technicality. We see Miguel loiter outside houses, study routines, test locks, At what point does thinking about it become hunting? Dexter is there to catch the exact moment the line is crossed. The irony is brutal. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to these reversals, because the focus is not just on the bodies, but on the way roles collapse. Dexter starts building a case file, mental timelines, motives, victim lists, adopting Miguel's prosecutor mindset even as he prepares to put Miguel on his own internal kill table. Stalk the target, confirm the victims, prepare the room. Only now the target is a man he once called a friend. That's where the emotional conflict bites. This isn't another nameless predator. This is someone he mentored, someone who looked at his secret and didn't recoil. For a moment, that history slows his hand, but it doesn't stop it. Because then, he finds the smoking gun. Ellen Wolf, the defense attorney Miguel despised, the woman Dexter believed he'd protected. Lab records, phone logs, fibers from Miguel's car, all of it lines up too perfectly with her murder. No Skinner, no random abduction, just Miguel, seizing power, using Dexter's lessons to erase an enemy. Along the way, we've watched Dexter justify, hesitate, rationalize. That ends here. In his mind, a folder snaps shut with Miguel's name on it. Ali becomes prey. And from this point on, every interaction is just preparation for the inevitable trial only Dexter will ever see. But if Miguel is now on Dexter's mental kill list, Miguel is playing a different game entirely. He thinks he's untouchable, and the way he shows it isn't with a confession, but with a smile that never reaches his eyes. Picture the two of them on the courthouse steps, reporters nearby, colleagues brushing past, the entire machinery of the justice system humming in the background. Miguel claps a hand on Dexter's shoulder and says, almost warmly, "We're in this together forever, right?" On the surface, it's camaraderie. Underneath, it lands like a sentence. The tone, the timing, the squeeze of his fingers. It's not a promise. It's a veiled threat. To keep this clear, Miguel isn't just some reckless vigilante. He's a prosecutor. His whole career is built on understanding mutual incrimination, leverage, the psychology of people who think they can keep secrets. If he ever goes down, he knows exactly what to do. Drag Dexter's name, Dexter's patterns, Dexter's victims into the light. That's the plan forming behind his eyes when he talks about trust and partnership. We see it in the way he starts using their shared kills as conversational landmines. At a barbecue with Lagerta and Rita, Miguel casually mentions a certain defense attorney who won't be bothering anyone anymore, glancing at Dexter as he carves the meat. No names, no details, but Dexter freezes for half a second. We feel the investigation that could explode if Miguel pushes 1 inch further. Miguel watches that micro-flinch and files it away. Control confirmed. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to this dynamic. Dexter believes secrecy is protection. Miguel realizes secrecy is a shackle. The central question for Miguel becomes simple. What can Dexter actually do to him? Go to the police? Reveal Ellen Wolf? Reveal Ethan? Every route to exposing Miguel runs straight through Dexter's own crimes. Miguel has finally grasped the structural paradox of Dexter's life. The code that keeps him hidden also keeps him silent, and once Miguel understands that, his boldness spikes. He references late nights at the cabin in front of Deb. He jokes about cleaning up Miami where anyone could overhear. Each time, Dexter has to swallow the panic, smile, and play along. The more Dexter cares about staying anonymous, the more Miguel can push, testing the edges of that fear like a lawyer probing a weak witness. There's even a near slip that turns the screw. In the hallway at the station, Miguel starts to say Ellen Wolf's name while Batista is in earshot. You remember Ellen? He stops, recalibrates, and turns it into a harmless anecdote about a court case, finishing with that practiced, political grin. He's telling Dexter, without a word, that he's willing to play right up to the edge of collapse. Along the way, this unspoken blackmail accelerates Dexter's timeline. As long as Miguel feels invincible, his behavior will escalate, his kills will spread, and the consequences will multiply. Dexter realizes Miguel hasn't just discovered his secret, Miguel has discovered the weak point in the entire design, and that makes him exponentially more dangerous than any enemy who simply wants to catch him. So what does Dexter do when the thing that protects him is the same thing that protects his monster of an ally? That's the next move in this psychological chess match, and it forces Dexter to risk breaking his own code in a new way. So when Dexter finally agrees to meet Miguel, it's not in a crowded bar or a sunny Miami street. It's in the kind of place where secrets feel at home. An unfinished construction site on the edge of town, skeletal beams cutting across the sky, security lights throwing long, fractured shadows over concrete and rebar. This is not a social visit. This is a battlefield, picked for its silence. Miguel is already there when Dexter arrives, pacing near a half-built staircase, suit jacket off, tie loose, energy barely contained. He doesn't bother with pleasantries. He goes straight for the jugular. Why is Dexter pulling away? Why is he suddenly so careful, so distant, when they share the same talent, the same mission? In Miguel's mind, Dexter is hoarding their power, acting like a priest of some private code instead of an equal partner in darkness. To keep this clear, we need to pay attention to Dexter's language here. He never says killing. He talks about what we did with Ethan, about taking action when the system fails, about the need for restraint and standards. It sounds responsible. It sounds controlled. But underneath, we can feel the panic. He's trying to pull Miguel back from the edge without admitting how many times he's already jumped. Miguel hears the sermon and bristles. He steps closer, voice dropping, eyes locked on Dexter's. Where was that restraint with Fribo? Where was that careful process when Dexter went after the man who killed Oscar? In this video, we're going to keep returning to that night, because Miguel does too. He references the way you handled Fribo, like it's Exhibit A in his private investigation. Proof that Dexter has no moral high ground to stand on. That line is more than anger. It's diagnosis. In that moment, Dexter realizes Miguel has reconstructed the entire Fribo scenario in his head. The missing body, the too convenient confession, the way Dexter always seems prepared when violence is on the table. Miguel no longer sees him as a one-time avenger pushed by grief. He sees a pattern. A long-term predator who has been perfecting this plan for years. From here, the conversation turns into a slow, verbal circling. They test phrases like probes. Men like us. People who can do what needs to be done. We're not like the others. Each major section will of their dialogue pushes a little closer to the truth, then veers away at the last second. Neither says killer. Neither says serial. But both understand exactly what the other is talking about. Then Miguel lands the line that collapses the distance between them. Men like us don't get to be hypocrites. It's framed as a challenge, but it's really a sentence. He is announcing that their identities are fused now, that Dexter doesn't get to hide behind a code while Miguel embraces raw power. They part without a handshake, without a clear resolution, just the sound of Miguel's footsteps echoing off concrete as Dexter watches from the shadows. No plan was agreed on, no truce was spoken, and yet we feel the shape of a fragile, temporary, non-aggression pact settling over them, the kind that can only end in betrayal. Along the way, Dexter's illusion of control has narrowed to a single, terrifying question. Does he eliminate Miguel or try to survive the monster he helped create? Miguel steps out of that parking garage confrontation with something far more intoxicating than safety. In his mind, he's just won a negotiation that never actually happened. He doesn't just walk away alive. He walks away convinced he owns the most valuable piece of leverage in Miami, Dexter Morgan's secret. From here, Miguel mentally crowns himself the keeper of the dark passenger. In his psychology, this isn't just knowledge, it's currency, political capital, a nuclear option he can spend or threaten to spend whenever Dexter resists. To keep this clear, Miguel doesn't see a fragile alliance between two dangerous men. He sees a binding contract where he's holding the only enforcement mechanism that matters, exposure. And that belief immediately warps his behavior. The cautious, grieving prosecutor who once obsessed over procedure starts talking like a man who believes the investigation can never touch him. He drops hints about our work in public spaces. He jokes around the Prado house about being tough on crime with a little too much edge in his voice. When Dexter warns him about Ellen Wolf, about the code, about limits, Miguel waves it off with that half smile. He's not negotiating anymore. He's managing an asset. This is Miguel's core misread. He assumes the central question for Dexter is always, how do I stay free? If that's the plan, then exposure is the ultimate deterrent. Miguel thinks, as long as I can blow up his life, I control him. But for Dexter, especially in this season, the focus is not just on survival. It's on maintaining Harry's code as the last thin structure separating him from complete collapse. Letting a code-breaking killer operate under his tutelage isn't just risky. It feels like a deeper, almost existential failure. So when Miguel uses Ellen Wolf as his test case, when he turns murder into a blunt instrument for vengeance and political gain, Dexter isn't merely afraid of being implicated. He's watching his student turn the code into a campaign slogan. Miguel starts sketching long-term plans, more targets, more justice, more influence. He talks about future elections, about a cleaner city built on their secret partnership, as if Dexter is permanently bound to him by fear. Notice Dexter's responses in these scenes. He doesn't argue loudly. He doesn't storm out. He goes quiet. Short answers. Blank, unreadable looks while Miguel monologues about their shared destiny. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to that pattern. The moment someone believes they've secured Dexter's loyalty is usually the moment he moves them into the to-be, eliminated column. The tragic irony is brutal. The more Miguel flaunts his leverage, the more he accelerates Dexter's resolve to remove him. Every smug toast, every veiled threat, every confident prediction about their future tightens the noose we know Dexter is already planning. By the time Miguel is alone, glass raised, toasting to the empire he thinks he's building on Dexter's back, the trajectory is set. Somewhere else in Miami, Dexter isn't weighing options anymore. He's designing the kill room that will end Miguel's illusion of control. Miguel's toast is the last time he's ahead in his own story. While he's imagining promotions and political capital, Dexter is doing what he does best, turning a feeling into a file. From this point on, every memory of Miguel becomes evidence. Laid out on an internal kill table only Dexter can see, Ellen Wolf's smiling face, the night Miguel went off script at the cabin, the lies about where he was, who he met, what he did. Each incident is a slide on that mental tray. To keep this clear, Dexter isn't just angry, he's building a case. Did Miguel kill for justice? No. He killed for power. Did he show remorse? No, he gloated, rehearsing speeches about real justice as if the code was a campaign slogan. Is he dangerous? Absolutely. A state prosecutor who now sees murder as a tool he's entitled to use. This is where Dexter's criteria lock into place. Guilty beyond doubt, unrepentant in motive, actively dangerous, beyond legal reach, because he is the legal reach. Harry's code doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room once all 4 boxes are checked, and Miguel, the man Dexter once imagined as a partner, now meets every single requirement to become prey. But the central question here is psychological. Does Dexter see Miguel as a rogue variable or as his own failed experiment? The answer is both. Along the way, Dexter has to admit Miguel is the monster he helped build. He chose to reveal the secret. He walked Miguel through the ritual. He treated the code like a franchise. That's on him. Yet, in Dexter's mind, guilt and responsibility are not the same thing. The consequences are real, but the solution, he insists, must still follow the rules. The code doesn't say, don't create monsters. It says when monsters threaten the innocent, remove them. So he performs a quiet, symbolic act. No dramatic flourish, no spoken vow. Maybe it's a name added to a hidden list, Miguel Prado, written in the same neat hand as Brian Moser and Leela West. Maybe it's a photo mentally pinned to an invisible corkboard, surrounded by the faces of Ellen Wolf and every client she might have defended. The exact prop doesn't matter. What matters is the reclassification. Miguel is no longer a colleague in the investigation. He's a case file marked for termination. From that moment, the texture of their scenes shifts. Every drink they share becomes reconnaissance. Every joke is a probe for weak spots. Every hug is a rehearsal for proximity, testing how close Dexter can get. How easily Miguel's guard drops. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to this pattern. Once Dexter upgrades someone from ally to target, his fear of exposure drains away and is replaced by something colder. A plan, a schedule, a checklist. The chilling calm that settles over him is almost comforting. The problem is no longer existential, it's logistical. Miguel's knowledge of the secret isn't a paralyzing threat now. It's just another variable to control, another risk to neutralize with careful staging and timing. The focus is not just on killing Miguel, but on erasing the version of Miguel who ever knew Dexter as anything but a quiet, blood-spatter guy. By the time Dexter's inner voice lands on the conclusion we already feel, Miguel Prado will end on my table, or I'll end on his. The trajectory is fixed. Discovery has done its work. The next phase is elimination. Miguel Prado will end on my table, or I'll end on his. And almost immediately after that line, the season shows us what it looks like when the student decides the table is his now. Let's kick things off with Miguel Post, Ellen Wolf, because that's the moment the brakes come off. Up to that point, he's been testing Dexter's code, probing the edges, asking who deserves it. And how do we know? After Ellen, he's done asking. He isn't following a system. He's revising it in real time, treating Dexter's carefully engineered rules as optional suggestions that can be overridden whenever his anger, pride, or political ambition demands it. On the surface, Miguel looks like a quick study. Nighttime drives, disposable phones, plastic sheeting, and a calm, methodical tone as he talks a target into dropping their guard. He copies the ritual, the tools, the choreography, but he strips out the one thing that ever made Harry's design vaguely functional, internal discipline. What was supposed to be a narrow channel becomes a floodplain, a defense attorney who embarrassed him, a rival, a problem witness. Each one can be rebranded as deserving the moment Miguel needs them gone. This is where the psychology of language turns against Dexter. Miguel starts throwing Dexter's own vocabulary back at him like armor. Justice, proof, deserving. He insists Ellen wasn't innocent, that they investigated her, that the system failed, and they're just correcting it. We watch Dexter hear his favorite justifications coming out of someone else's mouth and realize how flimsy they sound when they're not cushioning his own urges. The focus is not just on Miguel killing, it's on Miguel exposing the hollowness of the words Dexter has always trusted to keep himself in control. From there, Miguel goes off-grid. Independent scouting. Solo kills. Quiet disappearances that don't match cartel patterns or any active investigation. A contractor here, a witness there. People who are inconvenient rather than monstrous. Dexter doesn't just have a leak in his plan, he has a franchise. His secret life has been industrialized, scaled, and turned into a private enforcement arm for Miguel's ego. Along the way, Dexter is forced into a brutal mirror. Harry trained him to channel the darkness, then killed himself when he saw what that success really meant. Now, Dexter has replayed the same trajectory with Miguel. Mentor, code, shared kill room, and then the dawning horror that he hasn't prevented a monster, he's manufactured one. The central question becomes unavoidable. If Harry was wrong to weaponize Dexter, how different is Dexter's own experiment with Miguel? Really? And here's the paradox that makes Miguel so dangerous. The more he imitates Dexter, the more predictable he should become. Same tools, same targets, same ritual. But because Miguel has no restraint, no real line he won't cross, he becomes fundamentally unpredictable, a glitch in Dexter's usually reliable pattern recognition. Each major section of Dexter's mental playbook, surveillance, selection, execution, fails to anticipate a man who treats every boundary as a dare. By the time Miguel starts talking like he's surpassed the master, bragging about what he can do without Dexter, we understand the new stakes. Dexter doesn't just have a friend who knows his secret. He has a student who believes the code is his to rewrite, that delusion is the real threat, and it's the legacy Dexter now has to erase. So when Miguel starts talking like a man who's outgrown his mentor, Dexter's perspective snaps. The experiment is over. The friend is over. In Dexter's head, Miguel Prado becomes what all roads in Dexter's life eventually become, a target. And that mental flip does something important for our investigation of Dexter's illusion of control. Because once Miguel is a target, Dexter goes back to what he trusts most. Not emotion, not loyalty. Process, he rebuilds the relationship as a crime scene, step by step. Stalk the target. Confirm the victims. Prepare the kill room. That ritualized plan, the one Harry drilled into him, is the only thing standing between this got out of hand, and this collapses everything. To keep this clear, watch how methodical the inward turn becomes. Dexter starts auditing Miguel the way he would any unknown predator. Late-night drives that don't match the family man routine. Phone calls Miguel takes just out of earshot. Court days where Miguel is fiery in front of a judge, then eerily calm when a defendant suddenly stops showing up. Dexter cross-references Miguel's calendar with fresh disappearances, mentally mapping emotional spikes to potential kills. A rage in chambers on Tuesday, a missing name from the docket by Friday. Patterns, and because Dexter lives inside the machinery of the official investigation, he quietly weaponizes Miami Metro against Miguel without anyone realizing it. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to this move, Dexter using the system's blind spots as his private lab. He pulls missing persons reports that line up with Miguel's known haunts. He flags bodies that show hints of his own techniques, restrained victims, careful plastic, controlled blood loss, but with just enough sloppiness to betray the student. Wrong angles. Imperfect cuts. Trophy impulses that have nothing to do with the code. The tension is that he has to do all of this in plain sight. Every question about Miguel is a risk. If Dexter asks LaGuerta why she's suddenly so interested in Ellen Wolf, he tips that he's tracking the same thread. If he pushes Batista for details on a body tied to one of Miguel's cases, he risks looking obsessed. Deb especially is a problem. She reads fixation like a bloodhound. So Dexter has to act like a supportive friend while secretly building a case file that will end on a table. And here's the irony the season leans on. Miguel's badge should protect him. As an assistant district attorney, he knows exactly how cases are built, how evidence chains work, how investigations expand. But the focus is not just on legal proof here, it's on Dexter's off-the-books methodology. Miguel understands subpoenas. He does not understand a man who treats intuition, blood patterns, and private ritual as a parallel justice system. That's why Dexter keeps returning to his internal criteria. He can't just kill Miguel because he's inconvenient or disobedient. The code still matters. For now. The central question becomes, is Miguel a repeat predator who will keep killing outside any boundary? Or is this a one-time excess Dexter can reel back in? Every lie Miguel tells, every thrill he takes in Ellen Wolf's fate, pushes the answer towards serial threat. Along the way, Dexter replays the Ellen Wolf trajectory in his head like a forensic slideshow. Miguel's obsession with her, his fury when she blocks his cases, his insistence that she deserves to die, not as a necessary evil, but as a personal victory. After the murder, that post-kill glow Miguel can't quite hide. The psychology has shifted. This isn't about justice. It's about gratification. That's the moment Dexter's investigation turns on himself. Miguel isn't just a liability. He's a monster Dexter helped design. A broken version of the code, walking around in an expensive suit. And once Dexter accepts that, the trajectory is locked. The next table Miguel wakes up on will not be a classroom or a negotiation. It will be an execution. And this time, the failure won't be that Dexter shared his secret. It will be that he ever believed he could control what it created. Miguel doesn't just become a broken version of the code. He becomes something Harry never anticipated, a counter-investigator. While Dexter is quietly sketching out a kill room in his head, Miguel is sketching out a case file. And let's kick things off with the reversal that makes this season so volatile. Miguel isn't only reckless, he's strategic. From the night at Fribo's house, he's been mentally logging Dexter's tells. The oddly calm demeanor over Oscar's body, the too-neat story about how a junkie came at him, the fact that Dexter always seems to be orbiting the hottest point of any investigation. These aren't just emotional impressions for Miguel, they're exhibits. Each hesitation, each half-answer, gets stored the way a seasoned prosecutor files away a contradiction for closing arguments. So Miguel starts probing. Casually, persistently. Where were you that night, Hermano? Why do you always disappear right before something big breaks? He wraps the questions in jokes about Dexter being a mysterious guy, but he's watching like it's a hostile witness examination. Short question. Short question. Longer pause as he studies Dexter's eyes, his breathing, the split second before the lie lands. Miguel's courtroom psychology becomes a weapon Dexter never fully sees coming. To keep this clear, Miguel is not thinking like a cop chasing evidence. He's thinking like an attorney building a narrative, motive, opportunity, pattern, motive. A man shaped by a cop father, obsessed with justice, oddly detached from normal grief. Opportunity, a blood spatter analyst with unrestricted access to crime scenes, case files, and the blind spots of the system. Pattern, an uncanny knack for being right about suspects, for fixating on the worst predators, for standing just a little too comfortably over a corpse. Along the way, Miguel starts collecting soft evidence. Nothing that would hold up in court yet, but enough to map Dexter's trajectory. Dexter knows where Fribo is, when no one else does. Dexter has a bead on Ethan, the Skinner's associate, before the investigation catches up. Dexter's face barely moves when they talk about dismemberment or torture. These fragments don't prove a crime, but they prove a type. That's why Miguel floats the hypothetical. Over drinks, or in that quiet, conspiratorial tone. He describes a vigilante killer inside the system. Someone who uses police intel, picks the worst of the worst, and makes them disappear. He frames it as a thought experiment, even a fantasy of real justice. But he's treating Dexter's response like a cross-examination in disguise. Does Dexter deflect, moralize, or does he lean in, just a little too far? The central question for Miguel isn't, is this wrong? It's, is this you? And he doesn't keep all of this to himself. Miguel starts seeding doubt in others, just in case. A half-joking comment to Rita about Dexter's dark side and how well he hides things. A casual remark to LaGuerta about Dexter being more intense than he looks. He's laying social groundwork so that if Dexter ever turns on him, suspicion can be redirected, reframed, controlled. But here's Miguel's fatal miscalculation. He believes that knowing Dexter's secret, or even just being close to it, makes him untouchable. If Dexter is a killer, then exposing him is the nuclear option, and Miguel thinks that gives him permanent leverage. That illusion of control makes him bolder, sloppier, more willing to taunt the very predator he depends on. In this video, we're going to see that this is where the real collapse begins. Miguel doesn't just know Dexter is a killer. He starts positioning himself as the one man who can define, expose, or protect that killer, depending on how the game plays out. And the next move will decide whose case closes first. Miguel thinks he's learned the rules of the game. What he doesn't see is that he's arguing with gravity. You don't bargain with the thing that decides whether you live or fall. To keep this clear, we need to split their worldviews. For Miguel, the code is a tool, a way to turn backroom rage into front-page power. If he can aim Dexter at the right enemies, gang members, rivals, inconvenient defense attorneys, he can expand his control without leaving fingerprints. For Dexter, Harry's code isn't a philosophy at all. It's a survival algorithm. Non-negotiable, non-emotional, brutally consistent. Break the conditions, and the system outputs one result, you qualify for the table. We see the collision in every argument about Ellen Wolf. Miguel frames her as a monster enabling monsters, a political cancer he's morally obligated to cut out. Dexter pushes back. She doesn't meet the standard. The investigation doesn't support it. The code doesn't allow it. Miguel treats that like a debate. He haggles, he pressures, he reframes. In his psychology, the code is a menu. Pick what you like, justify the seasoning, call it justice. But once Ellen disappears and Dexter realizes Miguel freelanced the kill, the paradox clicks into place. The code Miguel thinks protects him is actually the mechanism that marks him for elimination. In this video, we're going to see that this is where Miguel's trajectory snaps. The moment he uses the code for personal and political revenge, he stops being a student and becomes a case file. Miguel's second miscalculation is emotional. He assumes that shared blood creates permanent immunity. They've hunted together. Dexter has confessed. There's the night in the cabin, the ritual with Ethan, the talk of brotherhood. Miguel reads all of that as leverage. How could Dexter ever apply the same consequences to his best friend that he applies to strangers on a table? Inside Dexter, the shift is almost bureaucratic. One day, Miguel is in the ally column, an asset who helps maintain the illusion of control. The next, after Ellen, after the lies, He slides, mentally and literally, into the future slide section. Same process. Same criteria. Different name. Once Miguel crosses from controlled vigilante to self-serving predator, the plan doesn't become more complicated. It becomes inevitable. And when Miguel starts threatening him, hinting at what he knows, implying he could talk, flexing that he can ruin Dexter's life if crossed, that's the final blind spot. Miguel believes fear of exposure is Dexter's primary limiter. He thinks they're playing chicken. Who's more afraid of the truth coming out? But the central question for Dexter isn't, will I be exposed? It's, does the code say you qualify? If the answer is yes, exposure becomes a secondary puzzle to solve, not a deterrent. Along the way, Dexter even runs a last diagnostic. He gives Miguel chances to pull back, to respect boundaries, to show real remorse. Miguel fails every single test. No hesitation, no guilt, only entitlement. That failure doesn't enrage Dexter. It clarifies him. The timetable accelerates. Miguel thinks he's negotiating with a man who can be swayed by fear, friendship, or flattery. He doesn't realize he's standing in front of a system. And systems don't flinch. They execute. And once Dexter recognizes he's dealing with a system failure, not a difficult friend, the response is automatic. The plan shifts. Surveillance resumes. Evidence folders reappear. We watch him quietly move Miguel from ally back into the familiar category of target, and the chilling part is how little the process changes. Shared history doesn't buy Miguel a single extra step in the ritual. Stalk the target, confirm the victims, prepare the kill room. The same triad Dexter used on Fribo now gets turned on the man who helped him bury Fribo's body. To keep this clear, the focus is not just on what Dexter does, but on how impersonally he does it. He tracks Miguel's meetings, documents his calls to gang contacts, gathers proof of Ellen Wolf's murder. This isn't a breakup, it's an investigation. The abduction itself is almost mundane. A dark street, a syringe, a body folded into a trunk. When Miguel wakes up under that harsh overhead light, wrapped in plastic, staring at the knives laid out with surgical precision, he finally sees the code from the wrong side. All those nights talking about justice and control dissolve into a single image, Dexter's calm face, framed by plastic sheeting. This is the true shape of the secret he thought he owned. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to that gap between what people think Dexter is and what the table reveals. Miguel believed he'd mastered the trajectory, upgraded the method, turned killing into politics. On the table, he realizes he only ever learned the choreography, not the logic. That realization hits fast, and it hits hard, so he starts reaching for exits. First, bargaining, he offers information, alliances, leverage, then threats. He'll expose Dexter, blow up his life, tell Lagerda everything. Finally, he reaches for brotherhood, invoking Rita, the baby, the shared secret of Oscar's death. But Dexter has already run the math. The code is satisfied. Every plea bounces off that flat, almost bored explanation. Miguel broke the rules, escalated the violence, turned the code into pure power. Listen to Dexter's dialogue here. He doesn't gloat, he briefs. He lays out the sequence like a prosecutor, Ellen Wolf, the hidden bodies, the lies about following the code. The central question isn't, do I care about you? It's, can you exist without collapsing my system? Once the answer is no, the outcome is inevitable. And then Dexter does something crucial. He uses Miguel's own tactics to reseal the breach. He plants evidence, steers suspicion toward the Skinner and cartel violence, folds Miguel's disappearance into the chaos that already surrounds them. The same political instincts Miguel used to weaponize the law become the tools Dexter uses to bury both the body and the knowledge it carried. Miguel dies thinking he almost mastered the secret, that he was taken out by a rival operator rather than a system correcting itself. In reality, he never grasped the invisible calculus that always classified him as an acceptable loss. Along the way, Dexter learns something too. As he walks away from Miguel's grave, there's no triumph, only recalibration. Teaching the code, he realizes, is more dangerous than breaking it, and his illusion of control has just barely survived its first apprentice. The next time someone gets close, what will he risk to keep that from happening again? That recalibration is the real legacy of Miguel Prado. When we zoom out, his entire trajectory forms a clean, brutal chain. He enters as a grieving crusader. Fixated on Oscar's death, he spots the hairline fractures in Dexter's Fribo story. He gets invited behind the curtain at that cabin. He tests and then shatters the code with Ellen Wolf, and in the end, he forces Dexter to kill the only person who ever fully saw him and wanted in. To keep this clear, Miguel doesn't crack the mystery through genius detective work. There's no master investigation board, no Sherlock-level deduction. He gets there through proximity, pattern recognition, and Dexter's own hubris. Dexter believes he can manage the risk, script the confession, and keep control of the narrative. He thinks the code is so airtight it can be safely shared. That belief is the failure. Miguel is the consequence. From Miguel stalking Fribo's house to him watching Dexter wrap Ethan in plastic, every step is Dexter saying, "I can handle this." But the central question underneath Season 3 is much colder. What happens when the code leaves Dexter's head and lands in someone else's psychology? Miguel answers that immediately. For him, Ellen Wolf isn't a last resort after careful vetting. She's a political enemy, a symbol, a way to feel untouchable. The moment her body hits that grave, we understand the paradox. The closer someone gets to understanding Dexter, the more inevitable their destruction becomes. Harry sees the monster and kills himself. Dokes reads the patterns and ends up framed and burned. Miguel learns the code from the inside and winds up on the table. Different seasons, different contexts, same gravitational pull. Dexter's secret is a black hole. The orbit always decays. And Miguel proves something Dexter will spend the rest of the series refusing to fully accept. This system is non-transferable. Harry's plan barely works, even when welded to Dexter's specific trauma, rituals, and compulsions. Once Miguel tries to franchise it, justice collapses into chaos, score settling, and ego. In this video, we're going to keep tracing that pattern through every ally who thinks they can share the dark passenger and walk away clean. We can already see the aftershocks. With Lumen, Dexter is careful, almost reverent about boundaries, as if Miguel's ghost is standing in every abandoned warehouse. With Hannah, there's intimacy, but also a guarded distance, a constant calculation about what she might do with what she knows. By New Blood, anyone who glimpses the real Dexter feels like they're on a countdown clock, even if he doesn't admit it out loud. So, was Miguel doomed the second Dexter chose to confess? Or was there a version of this where Miguel could have respected the code instead of rewriting it in his own image? That uncertainty is part of why this failure leaves such a deep scar. If you want to keep pulling on this thread, the focus is not just on Miguel. Check out our breakdown of Dokes' suspicion timeline, our dive into Harry's original design of the code, and the full autopsy of the Ellen Wolf decision, where each major section will map another permanent crack in Dexter's illusion of control. Along the way, we'll see how every collapse in his plan reshapes the secret he's trying to protect. Because Miguel may be gone, but the blueprint he exposed, the vulnerabilities in Dexter's double life, keeps echoing forward through every season, every slip, and every person whoever gets just a little too close to the truth.